Let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. Sergeant at Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Senators, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, for this evening session today, our second double session, we are very, very thrilled to have the one and only Senator from the 26th District who will do our invocation this evening. Please rise for that invocation.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. It's a good day, right? Mr. President and esteemed members, who I have the awesome privilege of working with you each day, which means I don't just have to pray at you, but I know what you go through because I go through it with you. So there's a sense of sensitivity there, and it's awesome. We had a great prayer this morning, so I'm not going to give you some elaborate prayer, just a thought and then an encouragement, and we'll go to work today. I said this yesterday. Every day I pray and I ask God to help me to be patient and help me to be kind to everyone. Patience is the key. And sometimes I reach that, and sometimes I really don't quite get there, because you have to consider that my seatmate, permission to use the senator's name, my seatmate in Judiciary is Senator Folden. So I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying. He's going to bust me up after this is over. I'm just saying, but sometimes, it doesn't work that way. Then the next thing I ask God to do is to help me to not make the same mistake twice, right? You do it once, but don't do it twice. Gentleman's home story of a gentleman. He's home, Mr. President. He's ironing, and he's on the phone at the same time, and somebody knocks at the door. He opens the door, and the gentleman looks at him and says, "You got 2 big burn marks on your face. What happened?" He said, "Well, I was on the phone and I was ironing. I got mixed up and the phone rang and I picked it up and it was the iron." He said, "I understand that for the one side, but what happened to the other side?" He said, "The fool called me back." Over again, right? And that's life, and that's making mistakes twice. And so I pray and I ask God to help me to not do that. And this is a blessing that I pronounce over all of us in this house today. Gracious God, let your grace and favor be with us. Guide us, teach us, bless all of our staff and this entire complex and families who are home. Grant them the desires of their hearts as we remember that my God shall supply all of our needs according to his riches and glory. Help us as we deliberate, holding this in mind as you help me. Fill my mouth with worthwhile stuff and nudge me when I've said enough, and make this a good evening and blessed. God bless you, and amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. That was wonderful. Thank you. That was wonderful.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Montgomery County.
Great. I would really appreciate if the Senator from the 26th District could lend me an iron, and I'd also move to journalize the Senator's remarks. Journalize a prayer.
I think it's seconded by the Senator from the 4th District. Is that
second?
Without objection, we will journalize our colleagues' wonderful, wonderful invocation. Good way to start this evening tonight. All right, so look, we are looking at tomorrow. Oh, wait, before we do that, let's make sure everybody has everybody recorded their presence? Has everyone recorded their presence? Appears almost so. All right, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is again in session. Tomorrow we are holding 10:30 a.m. 10:30 a.m. We're holding 10:30 a.m. for tomorrow. All right, so just mark it off now. 10:30. We got a lot of work. It doesn't look like we can get through it tonight. So 10:30. Just hold it for now. We'll see. At the moment, not looking good. All right. Any introductions? Any introductions? Any introductions? Any introductions? All right. If not, so be the reading from the journal from the prior legislative day. We have some House bills. Looks like they've sent the budget over in time. This is calendar number 15. Clerk, read the bills.
House Bill 200, the Speaker, Budget Bill, Fiscal Year 2024, Budget and Taxation. House Bill 202, the Speaker, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2023, Budget and Taxation.
All right, they will be referred to the Budget Committee. We've got a report from the Budget and Taxation Committee. Report number 17. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 358, Senator Salling, Procurement Construction Contracts, Contract Modification Clause. Favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 385, as amended, requires that the state construction contract includes a clause requiring a contract modification when there is a subtraction or an increase or decrease in the price of materials due to significant or special clauses or cases, that is, including and acts of God, such as an epidemic, a pandemic. Prices can change and adjust, so we took it to a limit to 10% as the cap, and they want to change. And the requirement applies only prospectively to contractors and construction and executive on or after the bill is effective date. And there's 2 amendments, Mr. President. One amendment makes technical changes to the title, and the second provides for adjustments into increases and decreases, limited to an adjustment of 10% for the increase and increases, and adds a definition also. I move the adoption of the committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 358 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 553, the President, Income Tax Subtraction Modification for Military Retirement Income, Keep Our Heroes Home Act. Favorable 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the Veterans Caucus as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 553, as amended, is an administration bill to increase the maximum amount of military retirement received by an individual that may be exempted from Maryland income tax to $12,500 if an individual is under the age of 55, and increases to $20,000 if the individual is at least age 55. The bill takes effect July 1, 2023, and applies to tax year 2023 and beyond. There are 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 makes technical changes. Amendment number 2 establishes the $12,500 and $20,000 subtraction amounts based on the age limit in current law. Move adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Chair recognizes the minority whip on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is of great interest, I think, to all of us. I think probably most of the bodies that co-sponsor. Could you just elaborate? The amendments strike out the $40,000 at the end. What was that amendment about?
Mr. President,
If I may ask, I'm sorry if the floor would yield. I apologize.
Yes, please.
absolutely. Well, that is a piece of the original legislation that was not carried over from the House and was not carried over from our committee.
Okay, so it didn't come over from the House that way. Okay, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 553 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 826, Senator Hayes, Homeowners Property Tax Credit Qualified Homeowner Application and Certification Requirements. Favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 826 is a really good bill. It just changes how the homeowners property tax credit program works. Right now, an annual application is required. The bill alters it so that once every 3 years, homeowners who only have income from Social Security, a pension, or an annuity have to apply. And in the intervening 2 years, all they have to do is simply certify that their gross income information hasn't changed. There are no committee amendments. I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 826 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 840, Senator Kramer, Public Safety Protecting Against Hate Crimes Grant Fund Establishment. Favorable 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 840 establishes basically a fund. Well, as amended, it may establish a fund that the governor can or cannot fund, but it is providing an additional $5 million a year in security enhancements for non-for-profits or religious institutions to protect against hate. There was no opposition. There were 2 committee amendments. First amendment adds sponsors, and the second amendment just makes clarifying changes and then changes the allocation of funds. I would move the committee amendments and adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 840 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 865, Senator Quarterman, Economic Development, Western Maryland Economic Fund, Future Investment Board, and Senator George C. Edwards Fund. Alterations favorable to amendment.
Chair recognizes the senator from Western Maryland as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 865, as amended, simply alters the membership for the existing Western Maryland Economic Future Investment Board. It authorizes the appointment of an executive director and makes clear that the board determines the projects for which grants will be awarded. There are 2 committee amendments. The first is a technical change. The second strikes the provisions that would have created a vetting board and a voting board and makes other changes that have been described. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections with the amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 865 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to judicial proceedings. This is report number 20. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 227, Anne Arundel County Senators, Anne Arundel County Abandoned Vehicles, favorable.
Anne Arundel. Chair recognizes the senator from District 4 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 227 this bill expands the provision of state law governing the treatment of abandoned vehicles, including provisions related to reclamation of vehicles and cost recovery by police departments to apply to Anne Arundel County and municipal corporations within the county. There are no committee amendments. This measure was moved unanimously. It passed favorable out of committee, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right. Floor leaders move for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 227 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 288, Senator Waldstreicher, Criminal and Civil Trespass Professional Land Surveyors, exception favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill creates an exception to trespass for professional land surveyors or an agent or employee of a professional land surveyor. There are no committee amendments. I move the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Yes, yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 29th District on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the floor leader would yield for the question.
Happy to.
Senator may proceed.
Just real quick, I've had some dealings with this being a property owner, and I was just curious. This means that if I have my property and I look out there and I see somebody coming across it and I go out there and they're a professional surveyor, they have the right to trespass across my property?
So they have the right to come onto your property as other government officials and like meter maids are able to do. If you were to ask them to leave, in other words, you did not want them on your property, they would leave. And so the idea is in many states, so many states already have this in their law, I believe a majority of states. So this just puts us in conformance with how land surveying works in other states, including some of our surrounding states.
So I understand, if I could just get some further clarification, Mr. President, I understand how this would work if they were surveying the property next door to mine and they had a legal right to be there. But if I just look out across the back of my farm and there is people out there just walking across, and I go out there, and they have no legal right to be there surveying, but if they're surveyors, they're exempt. They have that, they can just do that?
So the factual basis behind the bill and the testimony we heard in committee is exactly your first example. In other words, land surveyors go onto a property that they are surveying with the permission of the property owner, but sometimes need to go onto the next door property in order to complete the surveying. And so the idea is not that we allow them to just willy-nilly survey anyone's property and come onto their property. The factual basis behind the bill was that they're coming onto a property with permission for purposes of surveying that property, but need to step onto the adjoining property in order to complete the job.
And that I understand, but my question is, does this give the exemption for them if they are just willy-nilly out walking around and have a card in their pocket that says they're a surveyor? Are they then exempt from trespassing?
So a couple of things. So it's not just a card. They have to be a practicing land surveyor, which is a licensed profession. So it's not just anyone who would receive this right. It's someone with a particularized license. Second, I don't think they would be doing it willy-nilly. Stepping onto someone else's property is a serious matter, but I think they, like the states that surround us that already have this law, they want to have the ability to step on an adjoining property if necessary to complete their work.
Just so I'm clear, they don't have to have any justification for being on that property whatsoever, just that they're a licensed surveyor.
They have to be actively surveying. They can't just go onto the property for the purpose of entering the property. In other words, it'd be no defense to go onto your property in order to look into your house or to do any activity other than surveying once on the property.
That clarifies my question.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. I just thought I needed some clarification. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. On the report, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 288 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 292, Senator Waldstreicher, Criminal Law, Victims of Child Sex Trafficking and Human Trafficking Safe Harbor and Service Response. Favorable, one amendment.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee. Bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We passed a version of this bill last year. The bill alters procedures that a law enforcement officer and court must follow when there is reason to believe that a child who has been detained is a victim of sex trafficking or a victim of human trafficking. It also prohibits the prosecution of a juvenile victim who is being charged with a qualifying offense or violation under the law. Mr. President, there is one committee amendment. The amendment changes the dismissal requirements under the bill. I move the favorable committee report and the one committee amendment.
All right. Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment, the favorable committee report. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if I could ask the Vice Chair and floor leader to yield.
Sarah may proceed.
I'm just seeing this bill now. I thought it's been introduced a while ago. We certainly want to work on these issues. I'm curious when we talk about what kinds of crimes are now going to be able to be dismissed if we were to pass this as it's currently constituted.
So that's a really good question. So a number of years ago, I think when you and I were both here, we allowed victims of human trafficking to vacate a certain list of qualified offenses. This bill essentially takes that same process and puts it on the front end. The logic being, if they can be convicted of it and then vacate the conviction as if that conviction never existed, why allow them to enter the criminal justice system at all? So it's a number of qualifying offenses that you see on your screen, but it includes relatively minor offenses, including prostitution, drug use, and the like.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because the concern I would have, the vacating I supported. We supported if it had been documented that it was part of being trafficked, then they could be vacated. The concern I would have with the way the bill's worded, and perhaps you can help us with assuaging that concern, is by saying we're never going to be charged to begin with, are we in effect legalizing prostitution?
So we are not. This bill requires the same requirement that is necessary for vacating, which you and I both supported, that the senator and I just both supported. That is, the crime has to be committed, or the violation has to happen as a direct result of the person being trafficked. That is the wording in the bill. That was the wording we used when we passed the vacature bill, and that's the exact same wording we use in this legislation.
Can you help me to remember it? Because I really don't exactly remember what direct result means in the legal context. Can you, how is that defined, or how, it may not be defined in the bill, I'm not sure, but how is that defined in the courts?
So this is relatively new in Maryland, and the phrase direct result is not defined in the bill. But I think that the choice of wording that we have provided is pretty strict, because by requiring that it be both a result of the trafficking and a direct result of the trafficking, what we're saying is that being the victim of the trafficking is the proximate cause of the underlying offense.
Okay, thank you for that. I noticed that on the page 6, line 14, is a victim, for example, is a victim of sex trafficking or a victim of human trafficking. Sex trafficking could be considered someone who is operating as, I guess, not to be crude, I guess, but a pimp that's operating with prostitutes. Sex trafficking, that using the word trafficking implies it's being done against their will, right? But couldn't someone argue this discussion has come up before,
sure,
and I'm just trying to be sure on things like prostitution, and maybe, I don't know if there's some other crimes that we're not giving unscrupulous or seedy people who may be sort of trafficking someone a get out of jail free card. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
No, that is certainly not our intent, and I don't believe the bill does so. So first of all, let's just be clear. This bill only applies to children. It does not apply to anyone 18 and over. And so the idea that you would have a minor pimp is a difficult one to conceive of. I'm sure it happens.
I understand. Okay.
So this is only applying to children. The benefits that the law provides is not provided to adults whatsoever.
At all. Okay.
And so in terms of what is the definition of sex trafficking, that is a defined term. And you'll see under the bill, the cross-reference, sex trafficking has the meaning stated in 5701 of the Family Law article. And so that does have a defined term.
Okay. I think one more question, if I could, Mr. President, thank you. Are there other crimes? What are some of the other crimes that a minor could be, I guess, could not be convicted of under this?
Sure. So here are some qualifying offenses. They begin on page 7 of the bill. And so if you're looking for a full list of it, that begins at page 7. So qualifying offenses include CDS, fourth-degree burglary, malicious destruction, which is vandalism, trespasses, misdemeanor offense, possession of a fake ID, false statement.
So, okay, I see it here. Thank you very much. Why would burglary be something we would be connected to them being trafficked?
So, I mean, these are acts of survival. So if you are a victim of sex trafficking, you are often acting as a victim and required to do certain things by your trafficker. But let's be clear, the list of qualifying offenses is current law. That's why it's lowercase here in the bill before you. These are the offenses that we already decided as a body would be allowed to be vacated. And so this bill does not alter the ones that are under current law.
That's true, but what we already decided was that it could be vacated after a process, whereas this is just saying it's not going to.
So let's be clear. This bill includes a process. It has a process on the front end. If a prosecutor believes that the person is not, in fact, a victim of sex trafficking or human trafficking, there is an adversarial hearing where the prosecutor can make the case. This person is attempting to utilize the benefits under this legislation. They are not, in fact, a sex trafficking victim. They are a criminal, and this case should move forward. The prosecutor retains the right to do so.
Okay, and I think I said last question a while ago, but this I think will be the last question. adversarial process, well, you know what? I think what I'd like to do, and I don't want to keep going. I'd like to ask that the bill and the amendment lie over under the rule. I'd just like to read it closely, and that way make sure I'm not wasting the body's time. So,
All right. Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. Clerk, read next bill.
Senate Bill 383, Senator McKay, Family Law, Custody and Visitation, Notice of Intent to Travel, Maryland Child Abduction Prevention Act, favorable with 4 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 383, as amended, the bill adopts the Uniform Child Abduction Prevention Act, authorizing a court in the child custody proceedings in order to order abduction prevention measures if the court does find the evidence establishing a credible risk of abduction of a child and establishes procedures by which a party may file a petition seeking such measures. There are 4 amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes the provision of the bill. Amendment number 3 clarifies definitions in the bill. Amendment number 4 confirms the bill as drafted to the Uniform Act. This bill is in the same posture as cross-filed with House Bill 267. It passed the committee unanimously, and therefore, Mr. President, I move favorable with amendments.
All right. The floor leader moves for the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 4 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 383 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Is that the end of that calendar? Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 710, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Child Abuse and Neglect, Disclosure of Reports and Records, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Hartford County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This departmental bill expands the circumstances under which a report or record concerning child abuse or neglect may be disclosed to specified school personnel or to a director of a licensed child care facility or licensed child placement agency. There are no committee amendments. There was no opposition. We move favorable on the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 710 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 746, Senator Folden, Manufactured Homes, Sale of Manufactured Housing Communities, Manufacturing and Housing Modernization Act of 2023, favorable with 3 amendments.
Senate Bill 746. Senator from District 4. Senator from District 4. Recognized as the floor leader.
Sorry, Mr. President.
No worries.
Senate Bill 746. This bill establishes that an owner of a manufactured housing community must comply with specified requirements when selling the community, including providing notice of the terms of any offer or contract that has been conditionally accepted to each homeowner in the community and providing the homeowners with the opportunity to purchase the said community. There are 3 amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters the requirements relating to relocation plans for the mobile home park. And amendment number 3 makes the following changes. A, it requires a homeowners organization to comprise homeowners who lease or rent at least 75% of the lots in the manufactured housing community. B, it adds additional transactions that are excluded from the applicability of the bill. C, provides that a sale covered by the provisions of the bill may proceed without opportunity for a homeowners organization to make an offer if the purchaser files an affidavit in the land records affirming certain commitments. D, alters the requirements pertaining to notice of an offer the community owner has conditionally accepted if such notice is required. Limits the liability of a community owner to a party to a real estate transaction for certain violations. Alters the calculation of homeowners necessary to commit to purchasing the manufactured housing community. It alters the timeline for homeowners organization to obtain financing and close on the purchase of the manufactured housing community, and states that the community owner has complied with its obligation if these conditions are not met. requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to maintain a list of certain organizations on its website, and requires community owner and purchaser who files a certain affidavit in the land records to provide notice of the affidavit to each homeowner and post a copy of the affidavit in a public area of the manufactured housing community, and finally establishes a penalty for a purchaser of a manufactured housing community that acts in conflict with certain commitments affirmed in an affidavit recorded in the land records. The bill moved unanimously out of committee with a favorable report. Mr. President, I request we move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 746 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Finance Committee, report number 21. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 125, Senator Hayes, Business Diversity Incubator Program, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 125, as amended, establishes the Business Diversity Program in the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, also known as TechCo, for the purpose of providing grants to qualified incubator programs to establish diverse and effective business incubators in the state. The bill establishes requirements for grants, including limits on the amount and the duration of grants. The bill also establishes a business incubator fund and authorizes an appropriation of $1 million to the fund in fiscal year 2025. TechCo is required to report specific programmatic information to the General Assembly. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 establishes the Business Diversity Incubator Fund, adds requirements for the qualified incubators and grants issued under the program, and alters the mandated appropriation as described. I move the amendments and adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections to the 4 amendments? If not, without objection, the amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 125 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 145, Senator West, State Board of Social Work Examiners Temporary License to Practice Social Work, favorable 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, social workers are in all of our communities, just contributing to the quality of life of our citizens and helping to work with our most vulnerable. And so the committee has on this calendar 2 social work bills. I'll describe the first one now. It's Senate Bill 145, which basically establishes a conditional social work license in the event that the social work exam is unavailable. This has happened twice in the past 5 years, once due to the cyber issues that we had with our State Department of Health computer system, and once related to the pandemic. So this bill will allow that when those instances, should we have those unfortunate occurrences in the future, a conditional license can be issued so that social workers continue to work in the community. The second thing the bill does is it creates a temporary license. You'll hear, and I'll just go ahead and lay out the situation that led to this. The national exam that is required, the exam that social workers take all across the country, has been proven to have disparate results. That means African American social workers who go to accredited schools are passing the exam at half the rate of their white counterparts. So only about 40% of those who take the exam are passing it compared to their colleagues. And so because of that, there's a national conversation about how to make sure that the test is not discriminatory. So what is also in Senate Bill 145 is a temporary social work license for those bachelor's and master's prepared social workers until we can figure out what's going on with the test and correct what has been found to be a national problem. So now I'll tell you what's in the bill. The committee adopted the bill with 2 amendments. As I mentioned, one is related to the conditional license, which is only active for 180 days. The temporary license will be only for a 2-year period. And so there are amendments to the bill. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 requires the board to report specified information about the issuance of conditional license to specified committees. The amendment further authorizes the board to issue a temporary license to practice for a Bachelor of Social Work or a Master of Social Work to an applicant who, except for passing the exam, has met all of the appropriate educational and experience requirements for licensure. A temporary license is valid until the earlier of 1, notification of a permanent license, or 2 years after the date on which the temporary license is issued. The bill is amended to be an emergency act that will remain in effect until July 1, 2025, when the bill sunsets. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 145 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 347, Senator M. Washington, Baltimore County, Class E, C, BECF/DS, Education Conference Facility, Dining Center Services, licensed Towson University, favorable.
Chair recognizes Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Senate Bill 347 is a local bill that authorizes the Baltimore County Board of License Commissioners to issue a Class B Education Conference Facility / dining service, beer, wine, and liquor license to an individual who is authorized by Towson University. UMBC already has this authority. The bill makes other conforming changes to specify that the provisions of the license apply to either UMBC or Towson University. The bill has the support of the Baltimore County delegation. There are no amendments, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 347 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 665, the President, Assisted Living, Unlicensed Programs, Resident Abuse and Neglect, favorable 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, many of you remember my predecessor, the former chair of the Senate Finance Committee, standing on this floor and regularly talking to us, not only in this floor, but in meetings about the importance of assisted living facilities as a healthcare provider. She also expressed concerns about unlicensed facilities. So Senate Bill 665 requires the Health Department to investigate whether assisted living residents have been subjected to neglect or physical abuse when a person is found to be knowingly and willfully operating, maintaining, or owning an unlicensed assisted living program. If so, the person must be subjected to immediate prosecution. Upon receipt of a credible allegation or after an investigation finds that residents have been subjected to neglect or abuse, or if a person fails to or refuses to cooperate with an investigation. If there's no reason to believe that residents have been subjected to financial exploitation, neglect, or physical abuse, the unlicensed program must comply with licensure requirements in 30 days. The bill also repeals a requirement that written notice be sent to an assisted living program found to be operating without a license 30 days before filing charges, or in order to give the program time to come into compliance with licensure requirements. Mr. President, Amendment number 1 adds sponsors and alters the title of the bill to be the Senator Dolores Kelly Residents of Unlicensed Programs Protection Act. Amendment number 2 and 3 are clarifying, specifying that the Office of Healthcare Quality is the investigative agency and adds exploitation as a cause of investigation. There was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I move the amendments and the favorable report.
I almost said that the former chair of finance was smiling right now about this bill, and lo and behold, the committee's amending it to name it after. That's great. The floor leader moves to the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 665 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 794, Senator Carrozza, Behavioral Health Residential Program Food Service Facility Requirement, favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 794, as amended, requires the Maryland Department of Health to adopt regulations that establish food service facility standards appropriate for various licensed residential behavioral health programs with fewer than 17 residents. The two amendments alter the bill as just described per the request of the Department of Health. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 794 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 871, Senator Emmett Washington, Social Workers Licensure Examinations Moratorium and Work Group, favorable 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I mentioned earlier, a lot of work has gone on over the interim from a lot of members in this chamber. We want to applaud the sponsor and members of the Senate Finance Committee in particular, and others who have worked on this issue. Senate Bill 871, as amended, establishes a work group to identify alternatives to a specified social work examination requirements and to develop recommendations for an assessment method for independent practice as specified. And when I introduced the other bill, colleagues, I mentioned that we are going to have a conditional and temporary license for master's and bachelor's level social workers. We did not make changes to the clinical social work license, for which those folks can do third-party billing and are doing, psychiatric treatment. So we did not make temporary provision there. So we want this bill, Senate Bill 871, which sets up the work group, to do a deep dive into the challenges related to all of the social work exams and to explore the way that we license social workers in the state of Maryland. Mr. President, we adopted 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes provisions related to a moratorium on certain testing requirements for social work licensure. It provides for the composition of the work group, requires the Department of Health to provide staff to the work group, establishes an additional reporting requirement, and extends the sunset of the Board of Social Work Examiners to 2025. It also requires the board to notify an applicant whether the application is complete within a certain time period and strikes provisions of the bill that make it an emergency measure. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Any discussion on the amendments? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 871 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Report 2222. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 187, Senator Kagan, Health Occupations, Licenses, Certification, Registrations, Immigrants, favorable 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from Charleston County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, Senate Bill 187 fixes a problem that is a severe problem in Maryland. We have a shortage of healthcare workers. And in Maryland, for foreign-born, educated individuals to come here and to become licensed, they first have to be approved by the federal government and have a Social Security number. Well, the federal government says for them to get approved and get a Social Security number, they have to have license in Maryland first. So tremendous number of healthcare workers do not come into Maryland and go to other states. I believe 14 other states will process the paperwork in order for the federal government to grant the required Social Security number. So therefore, Senate Bill 187 fixes this problem, and as amended, it prohibits a health occupations board from denying a license, certification, or registration to an immigrant if the individual meets the relevant educational, training, or professional requirements for the profession. The bill also authorized the use of an individual taxpayer identification number for licensing purposes and makes other related changes. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 authorizes a board to require applicants to provide alternate documentation in an application file as authorized under federal law, and prohibits a health occupations board from requiring that an applicant provide proof that the applicant is lawfully present in the United States or have a Social Security number or individual taxpayer identification number as a condition for licensure, certification, or registration. Mr. President, I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 187 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 362, Senator Gazzone, Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics established, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes Senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 362 requires the Department of Health to apply for specified planning, development, and implementation grant funds related to certified community behavioral health clinics from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for fiscal 2025. The bill further requires the department to apply for inclusion in the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic Demonstration Program for fiscal year 2026. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 strikes the bill as introduced and implements the bill as described. The bill passed the committee unanimously. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 362 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 377, Senator Kramer, Workmen's Compensation Benefits Offset and Hearing Loss, favorable to amendments.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair,
President.
Yes, thank you, Madam Floor Leader.
Senate Bill 377 as amended clarifies that certain workers' compensation benefits available to specified public sector employees are limited or offset only if the benefits are based in whole or in part on the same body part. Amendment number 1 alters the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 strikes provision from the bill related to hearing loss and tinnitus, modifies provisions of the bill related to offsetting benefits as described, and specifies in uncodified language that it is the intent of the General Assembly that, number 1, the act abrogate the holding by the Supreme Court of Maryland in Spivak versus Montgomery County, and 2, the act be applied in a manner consistent with prior precedent articulated in Rieger versus Washington County Board of Education. Additional uncodified language requires the Joint Committee on Workers' Compensation Benefits and Insurance Oversight to conduct an evaluation of the effect of the bill on benefit offsets by December 1st, 2024. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 377 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 460, Senator M. Washington, Maryland, Medical Assistance Program, Gender Affirming Treatment, Trans Health Equity Act, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Howard and Anne Arundel Counties, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 460 requires Medicaid beginning on January 1st, 2024 to provide coverage for gender-affirming treatment. The bill expresses the intent of the General Assembly that Medicaid provide gender-affirming treatment to all Medicaid recipients for whom gender-affirming treatment is medically necessary. I want to remind the body that this is virtually identical to the version of the bill that passed this body last year, and again emphasize this is for gender-affirming treatment that's medically necessary provided by a licensed provider in accordance with current clinical standards of care. There are two amendments. The first amendment adds a sponsor. Amendment number 2 specifies that certain providers of gender-affirming treatment may opt in to having their names, location, and the types of treatment provided included on a certain public list. Move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move to lay the bill and the amendment over under the rule.
All right, the Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 648, Senator Rosapep, Electronic Health Networks and Electronic Medical Records, Nursing Homes, Release of Records, favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Anne Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 648 authorizes a nursing home that contracts with or uses an electronic health network or electronic medical record vendor to direct the vendor to release patient medical records or electronic healthcare transactions to a business associate of the nursing home. Among other requirements, a network or vendor releasing patient medical records or electronic healthcare transactions under the bill must make the records or transactions available on a regular basis and release the information in a timely manner to support patient care and monitoring. Amendment 1 makes a change to the purpose paragraph. Amendment 2 clarifies that the release of records and transactions is permitted with the consent of the patient or the patient's personal representative as required under HIPAA, and 2 prohibits the charging of a fee to a business associate contracted with the state-designated health information exchange to improve nursing home quality unless the fee is approved by the exchange. The bill passed the committee unanimously. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Any discussion on the amendments? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 648 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's move to Education, Energy, and the Environment. This is report number 27. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 166, Senator Waldstreicher, Housing and Community Development, Adaptive Reuse, favorable, 1 amendment.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Frederick City as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This bill establishes that adaptive reuse of a property to develop affordable multifamily housing is an eligible use of the proceeds of a loan for specified housing programs administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. The bill requires DHCD to notify applicants to those programs that adaptive reuse of a property to develop affordable multifamily housing is an eligible use of loan proceeds. The bill also specifies that the bill's provisions apply to any program operated by DHCD that awards loans that may be used to develop affordable multifamily housing. There is one committee amendment, and that amendment tailors the notice requirement to apply only to applicants receiving funds from housing-focused programs within the department. There is no fiscal impact, and it was voted unanimously by the committee. Therefore, I move for adoption of the amendment as well as a favorable report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the floor leader would yield for a question.
Will the floor leader yield?
Sure.
Senator may proceed.
Thank you very much. This bill, just taking a look at it here, would this affect, this is what you being able to utilize DHCD funds, but this would not supersede or affect any local zoning, correct?
I would think not. I'm not sure. I can get back to you, but there doesn't say anything specifically in the bill language that it would.
It's talking about repurposing buildings, and I understand sometimes it might be repurposing a commercial building, which is fine. I just was curious how it interplays with the local governments. But
well, state law supersedes local law.
Right. I didn't see that they'd come in on the bill, but
it's a separate process.
You mean the grant yielding process is? I wonder if maybe it looks like the sponsor of the bill might be willing to answer the question that I'm asking. If it would be all right for me to ask the sponsor of the bill the same question. Yield to the sponsor.
That's fine.
Will the sponsor yield? Senator may proceed.
Yeah. So this, I know we're looking at ways we can expand housing and get more bang for our buck with buildings that are already built, which I think is generally a good thing. Can you just comment on does this do anything with local? Yeah.
Thank you for the question, and thank you to the senator from Frederick for yielding. So this bill does not affect local zoning whatsoever. DHCD provides loans to local developers to build affordable residential housing. Most of those developments either are greenfield, meaning there's no housing there at all, and they're building residential buildings, or redevelopment, meaning they're taking down old residential buildings and building new residential buildings. This bill simply makes clear, without affecting zoning, that the same loans apply to commercial developments that are switching to residential.
And they would be switching to residential, but obviously they would have gone through whatever the local process is to do that.
That's correct, and this bill does not supersede that.
I assume so. I just like to check some of these things because there's a lot flying. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question remains on the amendment. Any discussion? If not, any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 166 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 371, Senator Hayes, Baltimore City Commercial Use Definition, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore City and County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 371 amends the state land use code, the section dealing with Baltimore City, to define commercial use in Baltimore City as including multifamily residential developments if the development is located within a waterfront commercial zoning district and within a half-a-mile radius of a commuter rail station. Now, while Baltimore City Council, its Planning Commission, and the mayor have an active role in defining and reviewing development plans along Baltimore's waterfront, this bill will ensure that the state maintains our interests in promoting tourism in a clean harbor and a healthy Chesapeake Bay. State level, so for that purpose, we needed a state level clarification of mixed-use developments, specifically to allow them within the catchment areas of the legislation. The bill received unanimous support in the Senate delegation. It also received unanimous support in the committee. So there are no committee amendments. There's no fiscal impact. So I ask for your adoption of the committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 371 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 783, Senator Hester, Historic Properties Disposition and Preservation Team and extension of the income tax credit for catalytic revitalization projects. Favorable to amendments.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 783 requires a smart growth subcabinet to develop a plan for the preservation and reuse of historic complexes. The amendment requires a smart growth subcabinet to issue a report by December 31st, 2023. The amendment authorizes the tax credit to last for 5 years from the date of issuing the certificate instead of 5 years from the date of project completion. The amendment authorizes the Secretary of Housing and Community Development to issue multiple final tax credit certificates if the projects are in phases, if one of the phases has been completed already, and if the tax credit issued does not exceed 20% of the expenses incurred by the entity or the developer. There are 2 committee amendments. The first one makes technical changes. The second one strikes much of the original bill, which would have created historic properties disposition and preservation team, and replaces it with what I just said about the smart growth sub-cabinet. It was unanimous in committee. I move the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the favorable report as amended. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 783 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 880, Senator Sidnor, Baltimore Regional Water Governance Task Force, favorable 1 amendment.
Chair
This is the
recognizes
emergency bill.
Chair recognizes Senator from Baltimore County is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 880 is an emergency bill establishing the Baltimore Regional Water Governance Task Force. The task force is required to review specified findings, assess alternative governance structure for the Baltimore region's water and wastewater utility, analyze the fiscal implications and efficiencies of each alternative governance structure, and make a recommendation regarding the governance model best suited for water and water waste systems in the Baltimore regions, and the legislation and funding necessary to establish the recommended model. There's 1 committee amendment. The amendment expresses the intent of the General Assembly that the task force strengthen the governance of the Baltimore region's water and water waste utility as a public asset managed and operated by local government. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The 1 amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from District 6 on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say I want to thank our county executive, our mayor, Baltimore City and Baltimore County working together. It's just something that I believe we should have done a long time ago, but we're doing now. And I believe working together like this and being our neighbor, we can all work together and make a difference. So I want to thank, the people that represent that area, our legislators, our county executive, our mayor, and the announcement that they made for all of us doing this bill to make a difference in our area, and it will. And I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right. Any further discussion on the report? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 880 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reader. I have to say, the floor leader, I wasn't sure if there was a master's win in the back. It's quite the jacket. Wins the well-dressed for St. Patty's Day award today, I think. It's excellent. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 911, Senator Simon Nair, Natural Resources Fishing License and Stamps Exemptions, favorable.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors. The floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill establishes the Department of Natural Resources to issue an annual recreational fishing license exemption to a governmental agency or a nonprofit organization to provide fishing clinics and instructional opportunities to specified individuals, allowing the individuals to participate in clinics and instructional opportunities without being licensed. This bill alters the reporting requirements. There were no amendments. I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 911 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 951, Howard County Senators, Howard County Board of Education Terms and Public Campaign Financing, favorable. 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Howard and Montgomery Counties as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a local bill with a delegation letter. As amended, the bill alters the terms of the members of the Howard County Board of Education so that the terms of office of the 5 members elected from a councilmanic district are staggered, and the terms of the office for the 2 members elected at large are also staggered as specified. There are 2 committee amendments. The first makes technical changes to the bill's title, and the second strikes the provisions of the bill relating to local public campaign financing for candidates for county boards of education. It passed committee unanimously. I move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report on the amendments. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 951 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Let's go to Special Order Calendar number 37. Special Order 37. Clerk will read the bill.
Bill 36, Senator West, Family Law Grounds for Divorce. Question is on the adoption of the favorable report.
All right. Question is on the adoption of the favorable report. Let's do, it appears that the Senator may have an amendment. Do we want to move the report first?
Yes, why don't I move the report?
Okay. All right. On the report, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Senator, the minority whip has a amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was working with the floor leader on this bill. There was some language on the second page of the bill that dealt with permanent legal incapacity of a party, allowing that to be a reason for pretty much instant divorce. I think it was just didn't strike me quite right. So I've got an amendment to just strike that language to take that out of one of the things that can happen more immediately with a divorce proceeding. I think it's going to be a friendly amendment.
All right. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
It is indeed a friendly amendment. I've checked with each member of my committee. Everybody says it's a good idea, so we accept the amendment.
All right. Friendly amendment. Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. All right. Any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 36 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. We have the layover calendar number 24. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 786, Senator Heddleman, Health, Reproductive Health Services, Protected Information and Insurance Requirements. Question is on the adoption of the 9 committee amendments in the favorable report.
All right, question is on the 9 committee amendments. Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first thank the floor leader and the bill's sponsor for talking to me about the provisions of SB 786 as I was trying to sort through the differences between SB 786 and the earlier bill we heard on second reader, Senate Bill 859. And I don't know if my colleagues, if you're not on those committees, if you've been able to actually sit down, but you have 2 different reproductive health bills that have come out of 2 different committees. So trying to grapple, which questions to ask to which bill. I did have questions for Senate Bill 786 if the floor leader
Well, the floor leader
would respond.
Sure. Senator may proceed.
I have a couple specific questions, but could you just briefly summarize the purpose of the bill? I want to make sure I understand it. I'm not confusing it with the other bill. And once I understand the purpose of the bill, and just a brief summary of the amendments.
Yeah, so the purpose of the bill is to ensure that an individual's medical records, an individual from another state, doesn't have their medical records sent through a network or a health information records without their consent, particularly with sensitive health services such as reproductive health care. You asked about the amendments to the bill. The amendments changed the title of the bill. They altered the restrictions on the disclosure of identifying information in public records.
They made changes to the information health exchanges and electronic health records would distribute. They established some authority in the Office of Health to identify what is called sensitive health records. There were amendments 5 through 8, which aligned the medical records law with the disclosure protections in the bill. There were, in Amendment 9, they established a deadline for the adoption of regulations and some reporting requirements. So basically, the bill, as introduced and as amended, it establishes protections related to disclosure of an individual's medical records related to abortion care and other sensitive health care. And sensitive health care would be identified by the department under this bill.
So this information, when we're saying we're protecting the information and it's not to be shared, where are we preventing it from going at this point?
We're preventing it from being sent to an out-of-state provider without the patient's consent.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was looking at the amendments, and I was on, there's 9 pages of amendments, so I was trying to focus on an area where I wanted to understand the role of the commission. As I understand, one of the amendments sets up a protected healthcare commission that would make recommendations regarding sensitive health services to be legally protected. And I was trying to, in the amendment it says, the commission shall identify sensitive health services information by diagnosis, procedural, medication, or related codes for which disclosure by a health information exchange or electronic health network to a treating provider, business entity, another health information exchange, or another electronic health network would create a substantial risk to patients or healthcare providers. So my question is, what type of recommendations would they be making?
So we would not prescribe that. In the bill and in the amendments you just cited, we gave authority to the commission to identify what sensitive health record information by diagnosis, procedure, medication, and codes for which disclosure would create a substantial risk. So we did not define that. We left that for the professionals.
I thank the floor leader for that. And this, again, part of this is I'm trying to learn what information is being shared, what we're trying to protect. My understanding is that if it's possible for abortionists seeking Medicaid reimbursement to report the number and reasons for abortions committed, redacting, and I want to underscore that, personally identifying patient information, wouldn't it be possible for the state to collect and report abortion metrics without violating patient privacy?
Yeah, that's a different policy issue. This bill actually doesn't change any metrics that are reported. It actually protects an individual's health record when that information would be transferred to another state. So it doesn't change any reports that would be developed by the department. It's individual data.
And I understand, and it sounds like maybe the bill was narrowed to just the out-of-state
health, right? So a Maryland provider, yes.
So during the discussion, during the committee discussion, was there any discussion about other protections, or this was just focused on this area of out-of-state?
This bill is focused on health information through an individual's medical record being shared with a provider with the individual's consent and not being shared without their consent.
Okay. And this applies to, I know the commission, I guess, is still going to work out these recommendations, but this would apply to whether it's Planned Parenthood or the Grace Maternity and Women's Health Center.
Whoever the provider might be, any
Okay.
provider.
Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate the floor leaders' answers to my questions.
You're welcome.
All right, question is on the 9 amendments. Any further discussion? If not, any objection to the 9 amendments? Any objections? Without objection, the 9 amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 786 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's do, Madam Secretary, can we ring the bells, please? And if we could do a quorum call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? As we are waiting for folks to join us, the House is out, so they'll be back at 10:30 tomorrow. 10:30 tomorrow. All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? So the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. We're at special order calendar number 34. Clerk will read the report.
This is the Executive Nominations Committee report number 6. Question is, will Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive?
All right, question is on the advice and consent. This is report number 6 out of executive nominations. Senators, please take a look at the list. Are there any nominees that senators need to separate out? Any names for separation? If not, oh, yes, thought that might be the case. Chair recognizes Senator from Howard and Anne Arundel.
Yeah, could I separate out nominee number 3?
2?
Is it 3?
3. Okay, 3. Senator wishes to remove number 3. Any additional separations? If not, we'll take up the report, but not number 3. And the question is, will the Senate advise and consent to the nominations of the executive? A green vote is a yes. A red vote is a no. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. Senator from Prince George's, thank you. Clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, the Senate advises and consents affirmatively to the nominations. Let's take up the next nominee, nominee number 3. All right, question is on nominee number 3. Question is whether we advise and consent to the nomination of nominee number 3. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, nominee number 3 is advised and consented to affirmatively. All right, let's go to special order calendar number 36. Hopefully we've fixed the bug. Clerk will read the bill. Success.
Senate Bill 806, Senator Kelly, Maryland Health Benefit Exchange and Maryland Department of Health, healthcare and dental care coverage for undocumented immigrants. Bill is on third reading for final passage.
All right, Senate Bill 806 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the chair recognizes the minority.
Just to explain my vote, Mr. President, I don't support giving taxpayer funds for folks who are here illegally, having taxpayer money go to give health insurance. I don't think that's a good use of our funds. Now, this is a report, but just to make it clear, I think it's a mistake to go down this track. And if we're going to study this, there's a lot of other things we ought to probably study as well, but that's why my vote is red.
Thank you, Senator. Any further? Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Maybe the report will say that too. Who knows? Not to be funny, but you never know.
All right, questions on, excuse me, any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 806, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, let's do calendar number 32. This is third reading calendar number 32. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 111, Senator Kagan, Election Law, Campaign Finance, Draft Committees, and Exploratory Committees, third reader.
All right, Senate Bill 111 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 111, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 143, Senator Feldman, Electricity, Net Energy Metering, and Virtual Net Energy Metering, Accrual of Net Excess Generation, Net Metering Flexibility Act.
Senate Bill 143 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 143, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 346, Senator King, Maryland Sign Language Interpreters Act.
Senate Bill 346 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 346, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 381, Senator M. Washington, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages, Class A, 7 licenses.
Senate Bill 381 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District has 2 minutes to explain her vote.
Thank you. I wanted to explain my vote that I'm supporting SB 381 to support a local bill. Thank you.
All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 381, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 391, Senator Lewis Young, Criminal Procedure Victims of Sexually Assaultive Behavior.
Senate Bill 391 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 391, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 428, Washington County Senators, Washington County Deputy Sheriff, Correctional Deputies, Employment Conditions, and Collective Bargaining.
Senate Bill 428 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 428, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 462, Senator Folden, Frederick County Sheriff Salary.
Senate Bill 462 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 462, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, let's see. We've got calendar number 33. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 483, Senator Lewis Young, Private Well Safety Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 483 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Goodness. All right. Punch drunk here. All right. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 483, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 551, the President, Department of Service and Civic Intervention and Maryland Corps Program Service Option Pathways established serving every region through Virtual Exploration Act of 2023. This is an emergency bill.
All right, Senate Bill 551 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? Senators, this is an emergency bill. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? Chair recognizes the minority leader. It's 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just in explaining my vote on this We've had a number of conversations about how we got here through the executive order, through the piece of legislation. I think we all do appreciate what the committee was able to do. One of the things I think was concerning to us was the costs. And we went back and forth with the fiscal note on where this was, how much it was going to cost to stand up this agency, but more importantly, how much cost per individual that was going to go through the program. And we heard some very high numbers in the $50,000 to $60,000 range per individual that could almost put us in a position of, maybe 4 years of college at, University of Maryland or something. So I think we want to make sure that as this moves forward, that we are holding the executive branch accountable, as we always do, and make sure that the dollars for this program is spent efficiently. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator. Are there any senators who wish to explain their vote? Chair, in explaining his vote, appreciate the sentiment. Certainly we will have to make sure that this agency is as effective and efficient as possible. But I do want to thank the administration and members of the committee for their diligent work on this. It was a hard bill. There was the issue with the executive order and then drafting it into the law, and so it was a hard process. And just want to appreciate the work that was done here. And this was kind of the Senate doing its best work alongside the administration. So appreciate it. All right, the clerk will take the call. With 37 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 551, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 559, Senator Gazzone, Education, Maryland Meals for Achievement in Classroom Breakfast Program, Annual Appropriation.
Senate Bill 559 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 559, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 561, Senator Gazzone, Goodwill Industries of Chesapeake Excel Center in Baltimore City, alterations.
Senate Bill 561 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 561, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 574, Senator Lewis Young, State Employees' Rights and Protections, Personal Actions, and Harassment Complaints.
Senate Bill 574 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 574, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 615, Senator Heddleman, Governor's Office Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kit Reporting Program.
Senate Bill 615 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 615, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 663, Senator Feldman, Investor-Owned Electric Companies, Clean Energy Home Pilot Programs, Establishment, Maryland Resilience, and Clean Energy Homes Act.
Senate Bill 663 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 663, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 685, Senator Waldstreicher, Vehicle Laws, Autonomous Vehicle Converters, Sale of Autonomous Vehicles.
Senate Bill 685 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 685, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. On to calendar 34. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 713, Chair, Education, Energy, and Environment, State Board of Architects, Sunset Extension.
Senate Bill 713 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 713, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 741, Senator Jackson, Public Safety Refrigerants, Limitation on Use.
Senate Bill 741 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 741, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 756, Senator Gazzone, Access to Counsel and Evictions Funding.
Senate Bill 756 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 35 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 756 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 769, Senator Carter, Baltimore City, residential real property, disclaimed property, and exemptions from prepayment.
Senate Bill 769 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 769 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 823, Senator Carrozza, Natural Resources, Annual State Park Pass, discounts for law enforcement officers and first responders.
Senate Bill 823 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 823 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 828, Senator Hayes, Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program modifications.
Senate Bill 828 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 828 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 830, Senator Hester, Environmental Health Specialist Well and Septic Systems Permitting Studies, Environmental Health Systems Support Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 830 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 830 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 836, Senator Brooks, Maryland Native Plants Program.
Senate Bill 836 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 836 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. All right. We've got calendar 35. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 21, Senator Folden, criminal law person in position of authority, sexual offenses with a minor.
Senate Bill 21 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Is that the first one? First unanimous one. Yes, very good, excellent. All right, with 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 21 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 100, Senator Heddleman, real property actions to repossess, proof of rental licensure.
Senate Bill 100 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 100 have received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 129, Senator Kelly, criminal law, sexual crimes, repeal of spousal defense.
Senate Bill 129 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 129 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 154, Senator Vital, Public Health, Mental Health Advanced Directives, Awareness, and Statewide Database.
Senate Bill 154 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 154 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 164, Senator Watson, driver's license suspension for child support arrearages exception.
Senate Bill 164 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 164 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 216, Senator Ellis, massage therapy definition, registration, and reimbursement.
Senate Bill 216 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 216, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 223, Senator Augustine, State Government, State Facilities, Changes and Closures, Procedures.
Senate Bill 223 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 223, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 228, Senator Bidle, Department of Aging, Long-Term Care and Dementia Care Navigation Programs.
Senate Bill 228 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 228, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 255, Senator Hester, Public Health, Home and Community-Based Services for Children and Youth.
Senate Bill 255 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 255, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 262, Senator Gallion, Environment, On-Farm Composting Facilities Permit Exemption.
Senate Bill 262 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 262, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Let's go to 36. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 300, Senator McCray, Baltimore City Youth Readers Program Expansion and Alterations.
Senate Bill 300 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 300, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 404, Senator Hershey, Hospitals Financial Assistance Medical Bill Reimbursement Process.
Senate Bill 404 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 404, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 431, Washington County Senators Alcoholic Beverages Class 9 Limited Distillery License Self-Distribution.
Senate Bill 431 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 431, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 446, Senator West, Estates and Trust Decanting, Maryland Trust Decanting Act.
Senate Bill 446 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 446, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 525, Senator McKay, Economic Development Program Participation Cannabis Business Establishments.
Senate Bill 525 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 525, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 541, the President Cigarettes Wholesalers Disclosure of Information.
Senate Bill 541 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, Chair recognizes the minority leader has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to say that this was really an important piece of legislation where we were able to say that the information that was coming in before may not have been complete and accurate. And now the General Assembly is requiring that it must be. So thank you.
All right. I don't think I understand that, but
No, the bill
Senator still has 2 minutes. Senator still has a minute left. If
Mr. President, the bill was dramatically amended down so that all that the bill does now is say that a cigarette distributor must submit information that is complete and accurate. So apparently before there had to be a number of reports that were not complete and accurate, and now with this piece of legislation, by law, it must be complete and accurate.
All right.
So I'm voting no.
All right. Chair recognizes the minority whip on the 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just explaining my vote and following up on the comments from my colleague. Number one, I think the committee did a good job because this bill came in trying to go after people and have a $1,000 penalty against them for not having information that was complete or accurate. I do think it's telling. This was a focus to get this done. Of course, our committee took it as it came, so it wasn't our committee's top priority. But I again am lamenting the fact that we have this long list of third readers, including cracking down on incomplete and inaccurate forms, but we still have not been able to get a lot of action on some other criminal activity going on in the state. I'd like to see if that could move here in the next little bit before crossover, Mr. President. But my vote's no, because I don't necessarily think we need to be spending time passing a law to make something complete and accurate. But I do want to say the committee did really good work on this bill because it was pretty far-reaching beforehand. Thank you.
All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 541 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 562, Senator Gazzoni, Maryland Small Food Banks Grant Program Establishment.
All right, Senate Bill 562 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 562 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 601, Senator Feldman, Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, State-Based Youth Adult Health Insurance Subsidies Pilot Program, Sunshine Extension.
Senate Bill 601 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 601 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 608, Senator M. Washington, Human Services, Maryland Statewide Independent Living Council.
Senate Bill 608 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 608 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 631, Senator James, Child Abuse and Neglect Reports and Records Disclosure.
Senate Bill 631, third reader, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 631 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. 37. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 649, Senator Alfred, State Government Regulation Procedures and the Maryland Registrar.
Senate Bill 649 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 649 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 684, Senator Waldstreicher, Criminal Procedure Victims' Rights Notification of Release from Confinement, J.C. Webster Victims' Rights Act.
Senate Bill 684 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 684 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 732, Chair of Finance Committee, Department of Disability State Coordinator for Autism Strategy and Maryland Commission on Disabilities, alterations.
Senate Bill 732 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 732 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 781, Senator Hester, Offshore Wind Energy State Goals and Procurement Promoting Offshore Wind Energy Resources Act.
Senate Bill 781 is on third reading for final passage. Chair recognizes the minority leader on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. On the bill, I know we had a lot of debate about this yesterday, and I was asked a few times yesterday evening, is this one of those bills that you have to pass before you can find out what's in it? And Honestly, I don't think that it is. I think the bill's pretty clear on what's trying to happen. And one of the first things that comes out on this piece of legislation is the dramatic increase in the size of offshore wind from the current 2.1 gigawatts to 8.5 gigawatts. Again, that's something that we haven't put one turbine out in the ocean yet, and the General Assembly is now saying that we have to quadruple the amount that's going on there. So what did the bill really do? You know, current law states that if the offshore wind developer achieves or finds any types of savings, that they are required to pass along 80% of that savings back to the ratepayers. And so what changed? The Federal Investment and Reduction Act, Inflation and Reduction Act, was just released in 2022. And now the offshore wind developers can go and get federal grants from that program. And this law very specifically says that they do not have to provide those savings back to the ratepayers. So big win number one, if you're an offshore wind developer and you can achieve federal grants, this bill now does not require you to give that back to the ratepayers. The second thing that we talked about extensively yesterday was what we called the plug strip, and what that plug strip was going to do. So again, this is another responsibility currently of the developers, that they are required at this time to take all of these wind turbines, bring the conduits into and land them onshore, all at their expense. And again, we are subsidizing these developers to be able to do that. This bill requires the PSC to seek solutions to build that. And so again, another area where the developers are responsible to do something, are getting a subsidy to allow that. We're going to take that off their hands and find another way to accomplish that. Now, an interesting thing that the bill doesn't say is whether or not these developers can actually respond to those proposals. It doesn't say that they can't. So again, work that they were supposed to do, they can respond to a proposal, do that work, and then those costs, again, are paid for in a different manner, again, through the ratepayers. But once again, the developers, and they're not required to provide 80% of those savings back to the ratepayers. So it's not surprising that the developers were not at the committee hearing to testify. Now, sure, they did provide written testimony. It was very generic, and it just patted the General Assembly on the back for saying, we're very proud that you are quadrupling the requirement for offshore wind. The last part of the bill, again, was something we talked about on how do the ratepayers fall, or how do the taxpayers fall into this. And in a very interesting requirement, the Department of General Services is required to figure out exactly how much energy they use each year. And once they find that out, they're going to issue a procurement for a 20-year power purchase agreement. And Mr. President, I'll remind you, the Finance Committee over the last 5 years, not this year, 5 years, has rejected long-term contracts. We thought that that was too much of a situation that locked in rates for ratepayers that could fluctuate. Sure, they might go up, but in most cases, prior to recently, we've seen those costs go down. And we wanted to be able to participate in that market if the prices went down. So we've not passed legislation for long-term contracts, but this requires that the Department of General Services enter into a long-term contract with specifically offshore wind, up to 5 gigawatt hours of offshore wind. So again, this is something that then guarantees the offshore wind developers a source of income. This is not the subsidy anymore. This is the state will actually purchase the energy from these windmills. And the interesting part of this is when they review the responses to the proposal, it's not based on price, as many of us would take a look at and say, hey, is this the best price? But it's also, they have to take into consideration the social cost of greenhouse gas emissions, the state's climate commission, or climate condition, and of course the policy that we've talked about already of expanding to 8.5 gigawatts of energy. The requirements fail to mention price at all. So why is that important? The advocates will tell you, well, the state's been buying electricity anyways. That's just a part of government. You know, it's something that we've all been paying for. I would just say that, yes, that's accurate, except we've always assumed that the government would act in our best interest and buy electricity at the best price possible. This is no longer the case with this legislation. So, Mr. President, we can go on and on about how much this has cost. We really haven't identified how much the ratepayers will be responsible, how much the taxpayers will be responsible. You know, again, we've passed legislation with offshore wind 10 years ago. We still don't have a turbine up and running. The fact that we think that offshore wind developers can accurately respond to a proposal on how much it will cost electricity for the next 20 years, I don't think that's feasible. We haven't seen them be able to even put up a windmill in the last 10 years, let alone tell us how much it's going to cost for electricity, what the state's commitment will be for the next 20 years. So, Mr. President, again, I'm going to be voting against this bill, as I'm sure you're aware. We are moving just a bit too fast with this. This is in a situation where it is completely not necessary yet. If we were out there building and the developers came to us and say, I can't make this work anymore, and they were willing to put their cards on the table and show us, which they haven't been. We've heard the phrase, well, it doesn't pencil. We've been hearing that for years with these guys. It doesn't pencil. It's too much money. They haven't shown us that. They haven't done anything yet. So I say before we take this next step, we evaluate what's going on. This is a huge step and a huge relief of the responsibilities that they have, that they had agreed to when they got the OREC prices, when they put in their bids. This was work they were going to do. And if they got savings, they were going to give 80% of it back to the ratepayers. This wipes that out. And, Mr. President, for that reason, I'll be voting against the bill.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, colleagues, we heard quite a bit over the last 2 days about subsidies. You know what we didn't hear, though, during the discussion about subsidies? We did not hear the discussion about the fact that the fossil fuel industry has been subsidized by every one of us in this room, by every single resident of the United States of America for over a century. The fossil fuel industry has been subsidized. One of the reasons we are challenged with renewable energy and making it competitive is because fossil fuels and their prices are kept artificially low by all of the subsidies that every one of you are paying. The fact of the matter is, last year, the estimates for the fossil fuel industry, last year alone, are at the low end, $25 billion with a B, billion dollars, with an industry that had record profits during the past year, $25 billion in subsidies and tax credits. This is the same industry that since the 1970s has known exactly the consequences of the destruction of the burning of their products would cause to our planet. In fact, their scientists in the 1970s predicted exactly where we would be right now with regard to climate change. They were eerily accurate. We know that now because in 2015, a host of documents from the Petroleum Institute and ExxonMobil were discovered. And the science that predicted the outcome came from those industries. So we are looking at an industry, fossil fuels, that have been subsidized at the same time they were creating billions and billions of dollars of destruction to our environment. Billions of dollars that we, the taxpayers, have got to pick up, cover the costs to mitigate the flooding that is along our coastline. And by the way, colleagues, second to Louisiana, there is no other state with more coastal title land than Maryland. We are going to be paying, and in fact, the low-end estimate for a 15-year window for what it is going to cost us to respond here in Maryland alone to mitigating the consequences of climate change is $9 billion caused by the subsidized fossil fuel industry. So, colleagues, I will share with you that I am enthused that the EEE committee has put this bill before us. I thank the committee, I thank the bill sponsor, because the responsible thing to do is what's represented in this bill. The committee has made every effort to minimize any subsidizing by ratepayers, but whatever those nominal costs may be, it is a significant investment in the future of our state and our nation. And by the way, we don't get a penny in Maryland from fossil fuel jobs. But you know what this is going to create? Millions of dollars in revenue, in job creation, and economic development right here in the state. And we have the potential at Sparrows Point to be one of the leaders in the nation and on the Atlantic seaboard in this industry, and to create jobs, create economic wealth right here in Maryland by virtue of what is contained in the legislation before us. Mr. President, I will be very proud to be putting up a green vote on this bill. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further senators wish to speak or have not yet spoken? Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I listened to the minority leader, and I always like to, have a little back and forth with him. There's a lot, though, he left out in his discussion about ORECs and things of that nature. First of all, he talks about the big leap up from the 2,000 megawatts we currently have to the 8,500 that is a goal by 2031. What he leaves out is the fact that at one time, a decade ago, we were a leader in offshore wind. We have been leapfrogged. Here's some of the numbers, because you're talking about 8,500. Yeah, well, we're here from North Carolina to Massachusetts. What's happened in other states? New Jersey's moved just recently from 7,500 to 11,000 megawatts. So he's talking about the 2,000 we're at now. That's a big leap. Not so much along the eastern seaboard. North Carolina, where are they right now? 8,000 megawatts, offshore wind. New York, 9,000. Now, let's keep going. Virginia, to our south, has just doubled where they're going with offshore wind. This is the competition, Mr. President. If we want to stay in the game, we want to reclaim the lead on offshore wind, we need to act now for a lot of reasons. And the senator from Montgomery just touched on some of the economics. Another point the minority leader sort of glossed over is the massive, massive investment of dollars that the Biden administration and through the the Inflation Reduction Act will be deploying and throwing into this space over the next 10 years. We're talking about 30% investment tax credit money, but equally important, and the Senator from Montgomery just touched on it, advanced manufacturing tax credit. And yes, folks looking at this region and our state, Sparrows Point and the Baltimore region and Port, we are well positioned to be the hub, manufacturing hub in this lane for the entire eastern seaboard. The gentleman sort of just glosses over that. In the meantime, what's happening in these other states, they're going after that money. They're going after that Inflation Reduction Act money, both for developer investment tax credit money, manufacturing money. We want that coming here, but we've got to act now. We've got to send the signal, and that's important to act. And let me just say, the signal's important. Just in August of 2022, Maryland, of all the workforce training programs in the United States applying for federal grants from the United States Department of Commerce, it was Maryland that secured $23 million for apprenticeships specifically dealing with offshore wind. That was because we have sent a signal that we want to be out front, we want to be a leader. Gentleman doesn't mention that. That was the Hogan administration. Certainly the prior governor understood how important potential economic benefits to our state are in this lane. And we could go on and on and on. Also, as for cost, the minority leader forgets that at every point in this bill there are off-ramps. Ultimately, nothing will happen unless the Public Service Commission determines that it is in our interest, taking all those things into account. We have off-ramps and safeguards that if the economics does not work for our state, we do not proceed forward with key components of the bill. Gentlemen, the minority leader, my good friend, conveniently omits that fact. And one final point, Mr. President. Right now, as we speak, the Federal Bureau of Ocean Management is opening up areas for additional leases out in the Central Atlantic. That process will be complete in 1 year. And this is, through this bill, we are sending a direct signal to that entity that we are serious, and those lease areas that are about to be identified should take that into account. In 1 year's time, it'll be over, and there's no indication they're going to reopen that conversation anytime soon. So this is pretty much act now or forget all that. These are some points, again, beyond the environmental benefits, economic benefits. So, Mr. President, just in closing, I just want to make the basic point. We want to get ourselves back into a leadership position offshore wind, obviously good for the environment, good for our economy, potentially manufacturing and the like, and access to hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of federal dollars flowing into our state. It also helps us prepare for a 21st century grid in terms of that, off-ramps and the like. So, Mr. President, for all those reasons, I would urge the body to vote green on Senate Bill 781. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an excellent debate. It's a critically important issue. It's square in our area of the state of Maryland. And I just wanted to reiterate, stepping away from this discussion at a time when we've just incurred one of the greatest episodes of inflation, when people are struggling to get by. Yes, there are subsidies, but this is a cost on Maryland ratepayers. It's a cost borne right here at home. There's over $1 billion right now pending before the Public Service Commission. We are piling on costs and expenses that won't be seen for a year or two, maybe 3 years. Our citizens depend on us to watch out for them. And right now, for me, this situation with inflation and the consideration of what people are dealing with is a overarching factor that I hope that all the members of the body keep in consideration. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion on the bill? Chair recognizes the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just sitting here and listening to the discussion, and I will not pretend to have necessarily the depth of technical knowledge that my colleague to my right here has exhibited, or that the chairman and some of the other folks who've spoken. I know they've immersed themselves in this issue, and it's a very important issue about energy. But I just wanted to comment on a couple of things as I sat here. Number one, we heard earlier about fossil fuels being subsidized. Number one, they provided relatively cheap and very, very consistent energy for that 100 years, and we're not subsidized by Maryland ratepayers to the extent that this is going to be subsidized. This is a $9 billion spend over time, and I think this is really important. We passed the first offshore wind bill to start this program. I believe it was 10 years ago this session. It might be 11, but I think it was 10 years ago this session. How much have we gotten so far? Really none. We're hearing about New Jersey moving from whatever it was, from 7 to 11, or I think that was the number. We've got none for all the investment that ratepayers have put out. We're not getting anything yet from our program. So now we're going to increase the goals and go harder when we haven't even gotten anything yet. Our insistence on the Eastern Seaboard, particularly in Maryland, that we know we need to generate more energy, and that's important. And renewables can be a part of that, no question. But it's like saying we need to build a road, and we could build a road with power equipment, or we can dig the road ourselves and grade it ourselves. Doing it this way is like digging the road ourselves. It doesn't make sense. There are so many other forms of energy that are more affordable, that are still clean or relatively clean. You know, we've not done anything to expand nuclear energy capacity. 96% of nuclear, of the output of nuclear energy is recyclable. But we're not doing anything with that. It's affordable, it's clean. Instead, we're doing a very expensive ratepayer and taxpayer subsidized wind program here, and it's going to add significant cost. I mean, for the last 10 years, the amounts on everybody's monthly bill have not been, it's been, you know, I think it's now about 88 cents a month, which is an expense, but we're going to start to see that really grow with this bill. And it's not to mention the fact that there's an environmental cost of setting up windmills in the middle of the ocean. So wind energy makes a lot of sense in some places in the country, but to make it make sense on the East Coast, especially where we are, we're having to inject massive ratepayer and taxpayer subsidies. It does not make sense. So I'm going to be voting no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion? Chair recognizes the Senator from the 35th District on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think my colleagues have touched a lot on the concerns I had that I brought up also in committee about our ratepayers and also our taxpayers' possible concerns. One thing that was not talked much about in the committee that's being debated kind of at the federal level now is the fact, and I hope the study portion of this bill will address this. I'll put that out there, but 29 whales have died on the East Coast since December 1st. So I'm really hopeful that as we look at these studies, and the study that's coming up here as part of the bill, that's addressed. I'll once again say 29 whales since December 1st. We've heard a lot on the floor about puppy mills, issues like that, concerns for those puppies. Just I think yesterday we heard about something about concerns about ducks being shot out of cannons, which was a new one for me. So I'm hoping that this study will address the 29 whales that have died since December 1st on the East Coast. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion on the bill? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District, followed by the senator from the 6th District. Senator from the 38th District has 2 minutes to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. You all know that I represent Ocean City, Maryland. For the past, since 2017, the town of Ocean City has been raising questions about not only the visibility issue, with other states can go 27 miles out, like North Carolina, like Virginia, why can't Maryland? That's a legitimate question that's out there that is unresolved. I offered an amendment in committee about making sure that the transmission doesn't come on Ocean City corporate for safety reasons, the fact that the fact that you have the population there for socioeconomic reasons. We haven't talked about the impact on commercial fishing. We had some fishermen that had their boats and equipment damaged with some of the work that was being done by the offshore wind developers. We haven't talked about military communications and how that impact. And we had an extensive, obviously, conversation about the extreme cost on ratepayers and taxpayers. So for all those reasons, I'm voting against SB 781.
All right. Chair recognizes the senator from District 6 has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't even need that. Thing is that I believe in options, and we believe there's many ways that we can get energy. And the worst thing you could do is eliminate options and take away from good options. And this is another good option. And it's going to bring good and private industry to invest in our state. Meeting with U.S. Wind and with Ørsted, those companies, I believe, in heart are doing the right thing and want to invest, and they are. So a 25-year contract with Trade Point Atlantic is a benefit not just for my community, but for the state of Maryland. And so, again, I believe in options. I believe in many ways we can make a difference for our communities and for us. And that's why I voted for this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? Chair recognizes the bill sponsor has 2 minutes to explain their vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of this legislation because the climate crisis is at our doorstep. Our children, and in some cases our children's children, are going to remember this. They're watching what we're doing here tonight. But at the same time, this bill is about energy generation, transmission, and distribution. And we've been warned by our own electrical grid operators that we face potential energy shortages in the coming years. And the Power Act is part of that solution. So as we set this ambitious 8.5 gigawatt target for offshore wind energy generation, we are planning thoughtfully for transmission, and we're positioning Maryland to lead as a wind power hub on the East Coast. And just as important is the economic development that you've heard tonight, but not yesterday. By passing this bill, we're going to see at least $1.5 billion of private sector investment in related manufacturing facilities and port upgrades. Colleagues, this includes $40 million for port infrastructure, $76 million for steel fabrication, $140 million for subsea cable manufacturing. And what does this translate to? Jobs, good jobs. I want to underscore this point. Our state's current 2 gigawatt commitment has resulted already in the creation of 7,000 highly skilled, high-paying, family-sustaining jobs. To put more numbers on it, the U.S. Department of Energy has found that the jobs associated with the offshore wind industry have average annual earnings, including benefits, of $141,000 a year. That's almost twice the national median income. So if our 2 gigawatt commitment has created 7,000 jobs, imagine if we quadruple that goal, how many jobs we will get. Colleagues, in summary, the Power Act sets a bold goal to meet the climate crisis head on, and at the same time, we are investing in the reliability, the sustainability of our grid and good jobs for Marylanders. This is a win for the environment, our economy, and resiliency. And for those reasons, I urge the body to cast a green vote.
All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 781, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 801, Senator Hester, Economic Development, Cybersecurity, Cyber Maryland Program.
Senate Bill 801 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 801 having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 839, Senator Kramer, Labor and Employment Workmen's Compensation Hernia.
Senate Bill 839 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 839 having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 851, Senator Carter, Maryland General and Limited Power of Attorney Act alterations.
Senate Bill 851 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 851 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 886, Senator Watson, Higher Education Edward E. Conroy Memorial Scholarship Program, Surviving Spouses of Service Members.
Senate Bill 886 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 886 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 913, Senator Gazzone, Education, Community Eligibility Provisions, Schools, and Pre-Kindergarten Enrollment and Funding Alterations.
Senate Bill 913 is on third reader for final passage. Senators, this is an emergency bill. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 913 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Calendar 38, clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 5, Senator Kramer, Hate Crimes, Civil Remedy.
Senate Bill 5 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 5 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 56, Senator West, Courts Prohibited Indemnity and Defense Liability Agreements.
Senate Bill 56 is on the third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 44 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 90, Senator Kramer, Commercial Law, Consumer Protection, Telephone Solicitation, Stop the Spam Calls Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 90 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 90 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 97, Senator Carter, Courts, Jury Service Disqualification.
Senate Bill 97 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 97 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 116, Senator Benson, Property Tax, Municipal Corporations, Business, Personal Property Tax, Rate, and Local Government Reporting Requirements Alterations.
Senate Bill 116 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 116 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 211, Senator West, Prohibition Before Judgment, Probation Agreements.
Senate Bill 211 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 41 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 211 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 239, Senator Feldman, State Employees and Retirement Health and Welfare Benefits Program, Domestic Partnerships.
Senate Bill 239 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 41 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 239 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 252, Senator Croza, Reckless and Negligent Driving, Penalties, Sherry's, and Christians Law.
Senate Bill 252 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 252 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 310, Senator West, Natural Resources, Black Bear Damage Mitigation Reimbursement Fund.
Senate Bill 310, not conflict resolution. It's on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 310 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 340, Senator Kagan, criminal law, false statements, emergency, or commission of crime.
Senate Bill
and
340.
Voting Act.
Senate Bill 340 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to explain their vote? Chair recognizes the bill sponsor has 2 minutes to explain her vote.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I just want to flag this issue because it is a crisis that unfortunately has gotten more traction. Last fall, there were about 200 fake calls in 28 states, and a lot of them are in schools. And they say there's an active shooter, or there's a bomb threat, or someone is being held hostage. And it started off as like teenagers playing video games and trying to get even with one of their opponents. But it's a pretty big deal, and I see that I'm having a really good impact here with my comments. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Vice Chair of Judicial Proceedings, who has been a leader and a partner on this, and the task force. We had a task force over the interim led by Meredith Weisel of the Anti-Defamation League with a lot of smart people in the room. And just want to thank everybody for their support for this good bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 340 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 411, Senator Watson, Prince George's County Judge of the Orphans Court, compensation.
Senate Bill 411 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 411 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 487, Senator Waldstrecker, criminal procedure violation of pretrial or post-trial conditions.
Senate Bill 487 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 487 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Chair recognizes the senator. Was at the end of that calendar? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the capital city.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to change my vote on Senate Bill 97 from green to red, please.
Green to red on 97. Any objections? Without objections, so ordered. Senator from District 6.
Same too, Mr. President, 97 from green to red. Thank you.
Green to red. Any objections? Without objections, so ordered. Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to change my vote on Senate Bill 828 from green to red.
828 from green to red. Any objections? Without objections, so ordered. All right. Number 39. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 493, Senator Carrozza, Commission to Study Trauma Center funding in Maryland.
Senate Bill 493 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 493 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 501, Senator M. Washington, Libraries and Aging Infrastructure Improvement Grant Program established.
Senate Bill 501, third reader, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Excuse me. Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 501 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 508, Senator Elfreth, Hemp Farming Program, Consumable Hemp Products.
Senate Bill 508 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 508 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 510, Senator Ellis, Procurement, Minority Business Enterprises, and Veteran-Owned Small Business Enterprises Participation Goal Scorecard.
Senate Bill 510 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 510 have received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 514, Senator Lamb, Local Procurement, Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Program Certification.
Senate Bill 514 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 514 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 518, Senator Quarterman, tax sales revisions.
Senate Bill 518 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 45 votes in the affirmative. Senate Bill 518, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 521, Charles County Senators, Charles County Property Tax Credit for Volunteer Emergency Responders.
Senate Bill 521 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 521, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 555, the President Fair Wage Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 555 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 555, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 579, Senator Hayes, Residential Property Service Agreements Prohibitions.
Senate Bill 579 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 579, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 610, Senator M. Washington, Primary and Secondary Education, Virtual Education.
Senate Bill 610 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the minority whip on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the floor leader would yield for a question on this.
Will the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
Can I just ask you, we had a long debate about this, and the issue of the Eastern Shore Consortium, we had extended debate about it. It does not affect my community or my county, but can you explain to me what the rationale is for why we can't have a for-profit element with aggressive oversight as part of virtual? We talk a lot about underserved communities, and Eastern Shore, a lot of rural area, and actually, in fairness, the city of Salisbury and other places, they have challenges that are urban challenges, just like any other urban area of the state. What was the rationale for saying you just can't have anything that's for profit at all?
It's a policy call that we have had in Maryland. When it comes to our public education system, we've been consistent.
But why?
It's our policy, it's our value, it's our position that public institutions should remain and should be primarily serviced by the public, and that when it comes to education, profit should not entities that are engaged in the work for profit is not in the best interests of our students. So for example, in this space of for-profit schools, and we've learned it in the virtual schools, and in particular I was looking at the contract that is currently servicing the blended communities. So in that contract, none of the, all of the data that is collected on the students, becomes the property, of the entity, and that entity actually sells that data. Additionally, it turns out, Mr. President, that when the individualized lessons that are created, those become the property of that provider, and that those individualized lessons are then repackaged and sold to other jurisdictions. So in general, to answer the question, is that we want all those who are providing services to our state for our children to be solely focused on the achievement of the students and not diverting any of their energy towards making a profit.
Wouldn't there be ways in those two specific instances, wouldn't there be a way to mandate that they cannot sell data, or that they cannot, and I don't know if what you're saying is I'm not, let me be clear, I'm not saying you're not being honest, I'm just saying I don't know there may be other extenuating circumstances. But if, assuming that's completely true and completely in context with all the information we've gotten, selling their data, you know, I don't want to get into the weeds, but about selling their data, how? I'm imagining they're not selling their data to, you know, Amazon. But if that's an issue in this particular instance, couldn't we make a policy just to say, yeah, and if you're going to be in this space, you have to have, you can be a public-private partnership, you know, and you can't sell data, you can't package individualized lessons. I mean, I don't know what's such a big deal about saying, hey, we found these individualized lessons to be successful with young children from disadvantaged communities in Salisbury. Let's farm it out to Frederick or somewhere. I mean, what would be the problem with putting that in place, since this is already in place and working?
Right. That's another bill.
Well, in fairness, it's not another bill because we're banning them in this bill.
You talked about selling data. That's a different bill.
No, actually, I didn't bring up selling data. You brought up selling data.
Mr. President, I was giving an answer to the question of why. I gave you an example of profit making, and that the point was to not focus on profits, but to focus on delivering education. That's
fair enough.
Sorry.
Mr. President, if I could continue to ask the floor leader, in the from the committee's viewpoint, we talk about there should not be any profit incentive. Do we not have lots of other times where we are engaged in public-private partnerships in other things like human services that also we don't want there to be a profit motivation in the state?
Education is the sole constitutional responsibility of this body, and that is the area in which we choose to set the policy of no for-profit entities.
So, okay, let me follow up with a separate question about this, and then I can move on to just speaking about the bill fully. Should we not have an element of requiring results in all of our educational standards? So whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, is there any?
Yes.
So in this bill, what's the requirement for results? If you're going to set up a virtual education outside of, put this Eastern Shore thing aside for a minute, if you're going to set that up, what's the requirement for results in this bill?
Mr. President, I would encourage the senator to look at the blueprint legislation and the AIB board that this body established.
It's interesting, Mr. President, because in my recollection, there were no standards for what students would have to achieve in order for funding to continue to flow. There were not. In fact, many of us on this side of the aisle that were here offered amendments to try to require some baseline level of standard, and we were not able to, from my recollection, and those were in the harried days right before we left here when the pandemic first started, which initiated the need for this Eastern Shore Consortium, incidentally, because of really an unfortunate decision to keep schools closed much longer than we should have in hindsight. But that's definitely another bill.
We're going somewhere.
That's definitely another bill.
Let's come back.
So I think we tried to say, where will we be in 10 years after all these billions of dollars invested from a student achievement standpoint? There is no answer. It's not in the blueprint.
Okay, so I'll be simple. The answer is yes. There are lots of places throughout Maryland law and through our policies where we hold entities accountable. We hold them accountable with charters that are not performing. Those are closed. There are a number of examples. Once again, finally, this is not a singleized, focused attack on a single entity. It's just there's no evidence to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the answers. Mr. President, as I speak on the bill here, I would disagree that it's not a singleized focus attack because it's targeting one single entity that seems to be having some really good success. I can point to a number of other institutions that are engaged in public education with no discernible profit margin that are not having a lot of success all over our state for a variety of reasons. I think it's unwise to just have a blanket rule, or certainly it would have been good to take the amendment that would have allowed a little more time. But so I'm going to be opposing the bill really for that reason. I object to having something so targeted. It's amazing to me with what we're hearing about results in our public school system in this state, certain parts of the state worse than others, but all of them probably behind, that this is that targeting this is the focus. It's the rush to pass something because there's a for-profit entity. I also just have to object to the idea that people who are engaged in an entity that is technically for profit somehow are just in it for the money. I can think of plenty of public sector institutions where you could argue that there are some people who have the perception that there's a lot of greed for just getting more and more in for particular public sector organizations or occupation. So, Mr. President, I'm just going to be voting no on this bill, and I would urge the body to consider, some level of local courtesy here. You got the 9 Eastern Shore counties. Some of them are the poorest counties in our state, and they've come up with a very innovative solution. And it would be very easy for us to put some guardrails around some of the things that my friend from Baltimore City and Baltimore County just talked about. There'd be very easy ways to put guardrails so that we don't have excessive data sharing or anything like that. And instead, this is just taking a hammer to something that's successful. So, Mr. President, my vote will be red. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th district. On the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just quickly, we're debating the bill, but our local boards of education don't want this. They don't want to have to give up that virtual learning program they've established. There's a great way to fix the problem. Just convince them. Give them a reason to support the change rather than force it on them. It's a local, that amendment we offered last night was akin to a local bill. I can't support the bill. I'd encourage everyone to think about the local needs when they come up from local governments, and local governments petition their state representatives. We've been petitioned by our local governments not to let this happen. The idea that a nonprofit somehow is different than a for-profit is unique. There are a lot of nonprofits that make a lot of money. They just don't report it. I'm not a financial expert, but we all know nonprofits that do quite well. Okay? I've looked into this a little bit further. There is a difference. This private virtual is not controlled locally. It brings outside ideas to local education. Not everybody likes that. But you know who does? The local board of education. They're the ones that set the curriculum. They're the ones that know what's best for their schools. It's just something for everybody in the room to consider. And I really appreciate your patience last night. This is a very important bill for Eastern Shore education associations. Unfortunately, I'm going to be voting red. I hope you will join me to vote red. There's still time to fix the bill. Maybe later on, if we can get some more time to give the boards of education an opportunity to figure out a way to make this work, they will make it work. They need the opportunity, but this is serious. This is something we fought. This is an issue that we go to the Hill on. We weren't sent up here, there are certain things that matter. This one matters. This one matters for the Eastern Shore, all the counties on the shore. We're talking about private versus nonprofit. Think hard about what nonprofits are all about. I'm on the board for a nonprofit. It's a local community action network. This is nothing like that. I mean, these nonprofits that run these education programs, they're not dealing with what the nonprofit I'm associated with are dealing with. That's a completely different ballgame. And then compare the for-profit. There's a lot of accountability on the for-profit. And they can be discharged by that local board of education like that. That's accountability. And the results show it. We talked about the results. Yeah, it's not perfect. Everybody's having a hard time. All the schools are behind. But we got a program that shows success. And that program is in jeopardy because of this legislation. Now, I'm very pleased, and I want to thank the promoters and sponsors for including the 2 years, but it's not enough for us. We are adamant that this issue be considered and addressed, and I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right. On the bill, Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th district.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we really do appreciate our colleagues hearing us out. It's an issue of fairness. This bill is affecting 9 Eastern Shore counties and 4 of your colleagues across the aisle. And when the question was asked earlier, why does this bill include a ban for the for-profit on virtual education? The bill's sponsor's response was policy. Well, the response should be it's about people. It's about students, parents. It's about the students who are benefiting from the program. We've shared with you 83% pass rate last year, improved this year to 86%. And when we talk about policy, this body has been really good that when there is a negative impact, that adjustments are made. We grandfather other programs. We've done that with other issues. We've talked about a reasonable amendment that was offered last night by my colleague and friend from District 37. Give us more time. We look at the 10 years. It just, again, for the response to be, we are going to shut down your successful Eastern Shore Education Consortium because of policy, something that is affecting, that has been successful with our students, our families. We have testimonials to that. We've shared that with you. That's what this is about. We should, when we make our decisions, it shouldn't be we're doing this because of policy. No, it should be, we should think about the impact on people and our constituents. And I know my colleagues have worked with me on other issues that have negatively impacted our constituents. Well, right now, we're not where we need to be. So we're asking you to support us, to give us the time we need so our students and our constituents continue to benefit from a program that is working with successful pass rates. I thank my colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion on the bill? If not, Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you,
Special
Mr.
order
President.
into the Saturday session? Is that the?
If we're Saturday, we're Saturday.
Okay, all right.
But you know what, Mr. President, this is important, and I know that you didn't mean that it wasn't. We've talked about this for 2 days now. We've talked about this last year as well, too. There is a piece of legislation in EEE committee that would have done a lot of what this bill does. It's offered by another colleague in that committee. Would have addressed a lot of these issues. But this is the bill that came on the floor. And Mr. President, that's what's so difficult to see about this piece of legislation. There was another opportunity to do everything that this bill did except target a school in our district, a school on the Eastern Shore that has been important, but for one reason only, it makes a couple bucks. That's the reason that we have this piece of legislation and not the other bill, and that's the reason that we're going to see this bill pass and not another bill that would have done the same thing except do that. And Mr. President, it'd be very easy to stand up here and criticize other school systems in the state. We've all seen the records. We've seen dismal rates for reading, dismal rates for math. But we're not doing that. We're not going to sit up here and criticize a district by district, a city by city, a county by county. We're not up here criticizing that. We're fighting for something that is important in our district, something that's working, that we want to keep going. This is a consortium that has found a way to educate children that may be disadvantaged, that may have difficult learning. That's what this bill is all about, other opportunities to educate kids. Yet this bill specifically targets one consortium. And you know what? Mr. President, it'd be nice sometimes to be in positions of other seats here. Many of us on the Eastern Shore, there's four senators on the Eastern Shore, represent 9 different counties, 4 senators in 9 counties. There's a county in here that has 8 senators. You know, it's very different when we are sitting here fighting for one thing and don't have the votes to be able to protect something that's working, and yet have a bill that specifically targets it, while we gloss over so many other difficulties in our school systems, in our public school systems. Yet the budget's going to come out in a couple days, and there will be hundreds of millions of dollars that are dedicated to public school systems to try to fix them. And yet we're dealing with the bill right here that wants to shut down something that's been successful. We're in a bad place with our education, Mr. President. And to be taking away opportunities of kids that need different methods and different ways to learn because it's for profit. That's the only reason. We had amendments in the committee that said if this consortium met every other qualification in this bill and remained a for-profit, could it move forward? Absolutely not. We got to take it out. It makes money. That's what this bill does. And Mr. President, again, it is sad that we are in a position to have to fight the way that we did. Everybody knew about this bill coming in before it got to the floor. It didn't have to be here. There was another option that could have been here that did not address this, but you had to take it out on 4 legislators and 4 counties, and the legislator brought this up earlier. You know, we do respect each other down here. There is a lot of local courtesy. We had a bill in Finance Committee today that we all didn't agree on, but it was important to Anne Arundel County, it was important to Howard County, and we all got on board and voted for it. I'd like to see the same courtesy and vote this down, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had absolutely no intention of speaking because the excellent senator from District 43 did a wonderful job, but there have been some misrepresentations that I just want to correct. This consortium is not problematic simply because it's for-profit versus nonprofit, and that's what has been said on this floor by senators multiple times. Even if their profit versus nonprofit status were not problematic, it is out of compliance for other reasons. Their teachers don't have the same type of training. They're not hiring necessarily Maryland teachers. They're not held to the same standards. There's not collective bargaining. There are a number of different issues that this bill requires that this one consortium, which can change. This body every year passes legislation with an effective date that's further down the road to give people time to comply. And those who said that it has 2 years, I just want to remind the body that it's actually been 3 years, because we passed a bill last year that the former governor vetoed, and that gave this consortium an extra year. So it has been 3 years to come into compliance. They still have the opportunity, and we will be back next year. So the conversations can continue, and if they decide that they want to comply, certainly I suspect that this body would consider updating the legislation. In the meantime, this is needed. This is needed everywhere around the state, including on the Eastern Shore. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further senators wish to speak for the vote? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of Budget and Tax as 2 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to explain my vote. Almost all the debate about this has been about the Eastern Shore Consortium, and I respect both sides of the argument. This bill does a lot more than deal with the Eastern Shore. It deals with an approach, a policy around the future of online education in Maryland. I worked with the former chairman of EHE last year on that version of the bill, and he worked with me to do what I felt was important, was get out of the bill most of the provisions that were anti-online education. He also put in provisions that provided a study of quality online education and how we can make that work for more of our students. And I appreciate the chair of the subcommittee this year working with me even more so. This bill is better than last year's bill in terms of strategy, including setting up an advisory council based in MSDE to really look at what works. I've worked on online education for a long time. I was on the Board of Regents of the university when we only had one institution that was online. That was University of Maryland University College. 23 years ago, it was a world leader in online education and continues to be today, but we didn't invest in it. And it's been surpassed by other folks. It still does a great job, but it could have been the dominant player in the field. A big reason, in my judgment, why we had so many problems during COVID with online education was we were behind. The school systems were behind, MSD was behind in getting prepared for quality online education. There is terrible online education, and there is very good online education. I've experienced it personally with College Park Academy, this public charter school at the University of Maryland founded in College Park. I've seen it personally with the TAWS program in Montgomery County for working students. It can work when it's done well. It's terrible when it's not done well. And I'm hopeful that when we come back next year with the advisory committee's work, that the committee, and I know that the chair said she will, we want to figure out how to get it right, not just worry about what went wrong. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. Any further senators wish to explain their vote? Senator from the 35th District has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you. We've seen different bills here over the years where a few of us may oppose them, and we work things out, and we end up with all green up there. And I think that could have very easily happened with this bill. The committee worked very hard and reached consensus on everything except for the one issue that we've spent all the floor time on. And it's just a shame that we couldn't give a little on that and get to that full green where everybody, because as my colleague just mentioned, all the good points of the bill, there's a lot of really good stuff there. It's just very disappointing that we couldn't have come together on this one issue and had most likely 47 green votes up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from District 6 has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Yes, just real quick, Mr. President. You know, we have so many schools in this state, so many different options in this state, and so many different ways where we do educate. And they get curriculum in other places and they use them differently, but at the end result, that we get some very good result in that. Our kids are getting educated. They're advancing. They're doing well. And it's always good to have options. To eliminate an option where children are advancing, where parents see the results, they are good, and taking that away from them is not, to me, is never a good thing. And the way I look at this is that if we get and we pass this, we could really discourage some kids and eliminate something that's good to them. I hope in time we will be able to work this out for our young people, because this is about our young kids and going to a school where they're doing well and they're advancing, and they've done well in this one school and in this area. So that's why I couldn't vote for this bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 29 votes in the affirmative, the Senate Bill 610, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill. Oh, yes.
My button didn't work.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Green.
All right. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. All right. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 622, Senator Zucker, Medicaid waiver programs, waitlist and registry reduction, End the Wait Act.
Senate Bill 622 is on third reader, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 622, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next. Oh, that's not it. Calendar number 40.
Mr. President?
Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from 34th.
Can I be recorded in the red on Senate Bill 97, please?
97 in the red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. All right. We have calendar 40. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 222, Senator Augustine, Environment Reducing Packaging Materials, Producer Responsibility.
Senate Bill 222 is on third reading for final passage. Chair recognizes the Senator from District 1.
Mr. President, may I address the floor leader with some questions?
Will the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
Good evening, sir. I tried yesterday or last night, but I wasn't as quick getting up, so I apologize for having to ask questions. So my question has to do with, in Section 2508, it provides immunity from antitrust laws.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering, why exactly is that needed?
It's just standard language, actually, in agreements like this.
Okay. Is it in other states?
Yes.
It is? Okay. How does this increase recycling or protect our consumers?
Once again, I think this is just like boilerplate language. The other elements of the bill are what are set up to increase the recycling rate.
Okay. Are there any other laws that would provide immunity just like this to the market competition?
I'm not exactly sure how you are saying that it provides immunity to market competition. I'm not. How are you?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is there any other laws that provide immunity like this particular in Section 2508 to market competitors?
Once again, it's boilerplate language that is standard for agreements like this.
Okay. All right. There was an amendment on the committee that went from $5,000 to $250,000 for the penalty. Where did this amendment come from?
I'm the one who put forward that amendment, and the reason for that was, as it originally was drafted, the $5,000 was against the PRO, and the PRO includes all of the brands. It's just for one entity. It's not, for that charge is not for every single individual brand. It's for the entire PRO. So in order to make it something that was more meaningful, we thought that raising that up, and it's just a top limit. They don't have to do that, but providing that top limit would make it such that we would get better compliance.
Was there any discussion in the committee that this might be too excessive?
No, there wasn't really a discussion that it was too excessive. It was just discussion that it was an amendment that we added on.
So if the PBOs end up getting this penalty, who pays that for it?
The PRO, and so those are those brands, those producers that are inside of the PRO as an entity.
Okay. What happens if the company can't comply with the provisions?
There are two different provisions. If they cannot comply, we have penalties if they are not able to comply, or if they do not comply. Again, because we want them to comply, we expect them to comply. If they don't, there are penalties that they are charged.
So does the business close, or does the manufacturer close?
Well, since we put protections in such that these are larger businesses, these fees would not be ones that would potentially lead to them closing.
Okay, so you mentioned fees. Does this include the packaging fees?
That is a separate number that is negotiated, which is the actual mechanism for the PRO. Again, so long as you participate in the PRO and you pay the portion that you have, you will not be subject to any penalties.
Do the fees, do they have any caps?
They are tied to, if you're asking about within the PRO, they are limited to the costs that were associated with the recycling of the item itself, and that includes the entire cost though. So that includes like transportation, the recycling process, or if we can't do that, if it has to go to landfill, the intent is to capture all of that, and that's actually where our main goal is, to try to reduce that overall cost and overall waste.
All right, so obviously we're talking about the packaging, and so the including of all this packaging, is that the same packaging will apply to baby formula, milk, eggs?
It applies to packaging. We do have certain exceptions, a series of exceptions I'm sure that you read in the bill, that include things where the brand owner is not in control of the packaging. So there, for example, are things that are controlled by the FDA. We put certain exemptions in because they are not in control of the packaging. And we worked with the folks in the industry to accommodate as many of those types of circumstances as possible.
So, and then there's a provision about this going to the counties. My question is, the money that goes to the counties, Is this for employee wages, benefits?
It is for the cost of the waste. So whatever those costs may well be, it will be part of the needs assessment is, of course, going to identify that so that we know what the whole cost is. So certainly, as you may or may not have heard when we were discussing this on the floor earlier, last time, that there is labor costs associated with the person who may drive the truck that transports the materials, the person who is running the recycling machine. So yeah, I mean, there are going to be, that's a part of the overall cost that we right now as Maryland taxpayers are paying for.
Okay. And when it talks to the counties about their wages, does it discuss about limits on administrative costs? I know that many constituents have talked, when it comes to water and sewer, concerns about padding administrative costs to make up the difference for those fees. And it's not an apples for apples. But
sure.
My concern is administrative fees.
We have an independent group that's going to study to make sure that we understand the entire cost. We also have the department, Maryland Department of the Environment, also is going to review that, and they're going to have to sign off on that to make sure that it's actually accurate.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. Mr. President, I have just concerns with this bill, and I'm not too sure about the antitrust provisions. I haven't been able to find that in other industries, and so I therefore urge the body a red vote.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any further discussion on the bill? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Oh, so before we, the chair recognizes the bill sponsor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to explain my vote. Should I?
Senator, yep, we're okay. Senator has 2 minutes to explain his vote. Yep.
Okay. So folks were looking at me today wondering why I looked a little bit nervous. And I will tell you, I was a little bit nervous. And here's why. I hope I don't lose votes with this. So I was not dressed appropriately for the day, for St. Patrick's Day, and one of the folks out here on the floor, they said to me, Senator, if I get a vote on this, will you do a little bit of the Irish jig on the floor? Now, what I'm hoping for is that would be out of order because I can't dance and I had to look it up and everything else. And so I'm very hopeful that the Senate President would suggest that would be out of order, but because I think that everyone should have voted for this bill on the merits, and I am grateful for everyone's vote.
Thank you. That would certainly be out of order. Out of order. Determined. I call it as I see it. Balls and strikes. Balls and strikes. All right, clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 222 has received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 546, Senator Muse, Criminal Procedure Medical Emergency Immunity.
Senate Bill 546 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, clerk will take the call. With 39 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 546 has received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 626, Senator Lamb, Health Services Cost Review Commission Members Appointment.
Senate Bill 626 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 626 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 679, Anne Arundel County Senators, Anne Arundel County Speed Monitoring Systems at Residential Districts.
Senate Bill 679 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 37 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 679 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 708, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Public Health, Youth Camps, Development, Organizations, Programs, Criminal History, Records Checks.
Senate Bill 708 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 708 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 742, Senator Smith, Vehicle Laws, Manufacturer, Dealers, Allocation of Vehicles.
Senate Bill 742 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 742 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 748, Senator Folden, Vehicle Laws, Military Vehicles, Registration, Operation.
Senate Bill 748 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 748 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 765, Senator Carter, Baltimore City, 41st District, Alcoholic Beverages Licenses.
Senate Bill 765 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 765 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 789, Senator Hedelman, Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kits, Preservation, Storage.
Senate Bill 789 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 789 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 791, Senator Alfred, Primary and Secondary Education, Public School Employees, Job Duties.
Senate Bill 791 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 791 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 866, Senator Zucker, Special Vehicle Registration Plate, Chesapeake Bay Trust and Maryland Agriculture Education Foundation, Appropriation.
Senate Bill 866 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 866 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Chair recognizes Senator from District 29.
Just wanted to say thank you to the sponsor. There was a lot of concern in my community, especially from the ag tags when we did our first bill, and he worked with them, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from District 2?
Yeah, I want to change the vote, if that's okay. Thank you. Senate Bill 679 from green to red.
679, green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. 679. All right. That's the wrong direction. I'm sorry. All right. Long day. All right. Calendar 41. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 327, Senator Alfred, Hunting, Wildlife Conservation, Outdoor Recreation, Funding, Promotion, Management, Licenses, Permits, and Stamps.
Senate Bill 327 is on third reading for final passage. Chair recognizes the minority leader on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just a quick question for the floor leader, please.
Will the floor leader yield?
Who that is?
Will the floor leader? Senator may proceed.
Quick question. Do you know is this bill currently in the same posture as the House bill?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. On third reading, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. Chair recognizes the bill sponsor for his 2 minutes to explain her vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, like most pieces of legislation, where this bill ended is not where it began, and that's okay. That's our process. I'd like to first thank the committee for really digging in on the issue and listening to the myriad of stakeholders who came together and brought solutions and productive conversation. But I'd be remiss, Mr. President, if I didn't note that in the 5 years I've served in the Senate, I've never worked on a piece of legislation that unfortunately elicited a certain degree of vitriol from some advocates. I've been accused of behavior that I think is frankly beneath the office I serve. Certain state employees have been accused of unethical behavior without any cause. And I just note this because we're going to have to work on similar issues moving forward, as was noted this morning. And I know everybody in this chamber works very hard, both here and in our communities, to reject that kind of discourse. It's not who we are. And so I just hope, it's my sincere hope, that moving forward, we're going to be more productive, everybody who's involved in these issues. This bill does a tremendous amount of good, as I said. for the first time in 30 years, DNR is going to have the resources it actually needs to effectively manage and conserve our natural resources. Now, this is going to be helpful when it comes to helping our farmers. With the estimated $60 million in crop damage they experience every single year because of deer. So a lot of my farmers are very happy about this bill. This is going to be good for our youth and our veterans and frankly every Marylander who gets to enjoy their outdoors and recreate. This bill represents the best of bipartisan collaborative work from members of this body from across Maryland and folks in our communities. I'm proud to cast a green vote, and I just want to say I appreciate the committee's hard work on this and thank the body for indulging me for just a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further senators wish to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 327 have received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 429, Senator Quarterman, Business Regulation Home Improvement Commission Guarantee Fund and Award Limits.
Senate Bill 429 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 429 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 540, the President, Human Relations, Civil Rights Enforcement Powers of the Attorney General.
Senate Bill 540 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 35 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 540 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 581, Senator Klossmeyer, Behavioral Health Care Coordinator Value-Based Purchasing Pilot Program.
Senate Bill 581 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 581 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 611, Senator Bailey, Office of the Attorney General, Environmental and Natural Resources Crimes Unit established.
Senate Bill 611 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the minority whip.
I wondered if I could question the sponsor of the bill.
Will the
Or
sponsor of the bill?
Yeah, just take a couple
will
questions.
sponsor-
Or the floor, I guess a question of. Yeah.
Sponsor of the bill yield?
Yes, sir.
So,
Mayor, may proceed.
I was looking at this bill, and I understand I'm trying to understand some of the motivation. So, the state's attorneys, excuse me, the state's attorneys do not oppose this bill, correct?
There was no opposition from the state's attorneys.
These are crimes. This bill is setting up a whole department. Do they have enough pens already to cover, the Attorney General do they have enough staff to cover this responsibility?
So that's a great question. And I'll just expand on it just for a couple moments. The fact is, colleagues, when we deal with the whether it be environmental or natural resource crimes across the state of Maryland, they are handled at the local level. This bill simply gives the Attorney General concurrent jurisdiction so that they can follow, whether it be the water polluted, whether it be the fish that are swimming, they can move from one jurisdiction to the other. And we need specialized prosecutors. What we don't have in Maryland is we don't have prosecutors that actually are experienced in the complexity of our environmental laws. And that is what this bill does. It creates that. Now, there currently is one specialized prosecutor in the Attorney General's office, and there's one investigator. But this regulation actually puts it in statute.
And thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to follow up with a question. So if we allow this, if we pass this bill, can state's attorneys still be involved in the process, or how does that work?
That's correct. They can still be involved in the process. It doesn't take it away from them, but it allows concurrent jurisdiction.
Because my concern was that, and I'm still trying to decide, but my concern was that you'd want, if there's some major crime in this area in a county, a state's attorney would want to be involved, whereas perhaps some of the issue is that these crimes are not ones that they're tracking as well. I mean, is that part of what the motivation?
So the reality is the natural resource police make up less than 1% of the police in the actual state of Maryland. the crimes that they investigate and the environmental and the natural resource crimes make up a fraction of 1% of the cases that actually are taken before the state's attorneys. So the local state's attorneys don't have that much of an interest, right? And here's the conflict that they have. They have a murder or an assault that happens, and they have to dedicate their limited resources to that. This simply gives the Attorney General that office of some specialized attorneys that can move around and actually do that work and work in conjunction with them.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on third reading, final passage, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 34 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 611 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 624, Senator Zucker, Income Tax, Automated External Defibrillator Tax Credit, Joe Shea Act.
Senate Bill 624 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 624, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 641, Senator Jackson, Law Enforcement Officers Pension System, City of Bowie Police Department, Transfers and Purchases of Service.
All right, Senate Bill 641 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 641 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 692, Senator King, Income Tax Credit for Purchase of Zero-Emission and Hybrid Mobile Machinery.
Senate Bill 692 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 692 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 813, Senator A. Washington, Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program, Environmental Justice Funding.
Senate Bill 813 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 38 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 813 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 859, Senator Smith, Reproductive Health Protection Act.
Senate Bill 859 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District on the bill.
Thank you. I had a few questions if the floor leader.
Will the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
Thank you. I had mentioned earlier that I had earlier questions on an earlier bill, but it's probably more targeted to this. It says Reproductive Health Protection Act. Who are we protecting?
So this bill seeks to protect people that are providing reproductive health care in Maryland and people that would come here to seek that care, whether they be from out of the state or in Maryland itself. And so it seeks to protect the providers and those who seek health care from administrative penalties, from potential criminal and potential civil liability as well.
So it would be the providers that are being protected in what way?
So let's say in Maryland we have providers that are providing that legally protected health care. But then someone comes from Texas, let's say, and seeks health care and gets that health care here in Maryland. There are a couple scenarios in which that provider could potentially be on the hook for an administrative penalty. Let's say they provided care in multiple states, or they could have their license yanked in the other state that the person came here from, or they could have their insurance hiked up because they provided insurance here, but another state has criminalized that activity. So for instance, in Texas, they started criminalizing the act of leaving the state and receiving health care in Maryland, and then that person goes back to Texas. That provider needs to be protected from any sort of administrative liability, like having their license yanked. If they had it yanked in Texas, then we would still protect and honor that license here in Maryland.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand this. So these are the out-of-state providers that are coming into Maryland that we're protecting?
Let's say this. So there's a provider that provides care in Maryland, but also in Virginia and Delaware and Pennsylvania.
That they provide in other states.
That's one scenario.
Okay.
But they're here in Maryland, and they provide that care in Maryland. And because they provide that care in Maryland, Pennsylvania is going to say, look, you know what? We've criminalized that activity. We're going to yank your license to practice. Fine. That's Pennsylvania's law. What we're saying here in Maryland is we're going to protect your ability to continue providing that legally protected health care in Maryland. And for the patient, if the patient comes here and they receive legally protected health care, like let's say they receive a pill, we in Maryland are going to protect that person from criminal or civil liability. And we're going to say, look, if it's legal here in Maryland, we're not going to have you extradited to another state so that you could face criminal penalty there.
So would it protect a provider in a state that does not allow late-term abortions, and then that provider could send a patient to Maryland?
No, this is all about what happens inside of Maryland. So it only protects people in Maryland. We don't have the ability to do anything, interfere with any other state's laws while they're in another state.
I'm just trying to understand, is the legislation also to protect the abortion centers themselves? Have there been
in Maryland?
Have there been attacks?
Here's the deal. People, since Dobbs has come down, over 300 pieces of legislation have been entered in state legislatures across the country, and 14 states have had serious criminal penalties implemented for abortion care, for health care, legally protected health care. And so if a provider is here in Maryland and also provides in another state, they could face administrative penalties, meaning and insurance consequences. Because if they have their insurance, if they face disciplinary action in another state, then that could drive up their insurance premiums here, and it could also jeopardize their license to practice here. What we've said here in Maryland is saying, look, if Texas or Virginia or West Virginia changes their laws to criminalize or to penalize in any way, administratively or criminally or civil, that we here in Maryland are going to say, look, you're still good to go. You're still going to be able to practice here in Maryland. Your insurance premiums are not going to go up because of the administrative activity that's happened in a different state. And so Maryland will still be a place where you can come and seek that legally protected health care.
I thank the floor leader. It seemed I was hearing that we were overly concerned about protecting the abortion clinics themselves, and so I'm trying to think, well, if that's the case, and as far as my research is, there's been no attacks. If anything, there's been some concerns about some of the other centers that are providing services. That's why I was trying to understand if this legislation is necessary.
This bill deals, again, with we're not talking about physical attacks. We're talking about attacks on your license. We're talking about your attacks on people getting foreign judgments. We're talking about potential criminal liability. So we're talking about that, not physical attacks against the center.
But we have concerns. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
We have concerns, though, that those Planned Parenthood or others, that they are under attack that way with those licensures and other issues?
Absolutely. Providers are terrified because every state now has a patchwork of protection, and so it has had a chilling effect. And we in Maryland want to take the proactive steps in ensuring that those centers are still able to provide that legally protected health care here in Maryland.
I have one question dealing with the Constitution, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm asking this because I don't know, but Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution of the United States requires cooperation between states to enforce civil judgments. So my question is SB 859 constitutional under Article 4, Section 2 of the United States Constitution?
Yes. So a couple of things there. One is there for the judges, there's something called, for the extradition, there's something called permissive and there's something called mandatory. We'll just do extradition first, and then we'll do the other piece. So one of the exceptions, there are three, but one of the exceptions is if there's for a judgment, for instance, is if it's punitive. So for in Texas, that law allows an individual to go after another individual for getting an abortion, right? Even if they've received no harm themselves. It's like a vigilante system of going after people for having abortions. And there's no harm to the person that's seeking to invoke this law. That's a punitive law. And so in Maryland, we're saying, look, that's an exception, and we can protect that person. Just because they've come to Maryland to seek that health care doesn't mean that we have to then bring them back to Texas, for instance, because it's a punitive judgment. So it's something that we don't have to honor, and that's an exception to that rule.
So you're saying it is constitutional?
100% constitutional.
My last point, and I really appreciate my colleagues' indulgence. I had a conversation with the good senator from District 16. I had a conversation with the floor leader on the earlier bill. I'm raising the questions because when I see something about protection in a bill, with the dramatic expansion of abortion in Maryland last year, with non-physicians being allowed to perform abortions, we've got state money going into the training of the non-physicians. We have a bill that's going to require our public institutions of higher education to have reproductive health plans and services, and we are moving forward with we're going to enshrine abortion in our Maryland Constitution. I say all this is background in that we have to accept that the number of cases, the number of abortions will increase. So as we move forward, I believe, and I would like to think that my colleagues, that we can work through, and my question is, was there anything in here to protect, since protection's in the title, pregnant women overall? And if this isn't the bill, I would like my colleagues to think about, as you are advocating for expanding abortion, if we can work together on how we can put some more safeguards in to protect all pregnant women regardless of their choice. So my last question is there anything in the bill that protects pregnant women from coercion?
No, so get it, yeah. So, I mean, nothing that's not already in the law for legally protected health care, which I'll just say I'll just read the definition because it is a defined term. All reproductive health services, medications, supplies related to the direct provision or support of the provision of care related to pregnancy, contraception, assisted reproduction, and abortion that is lawful here in Maryland. And so there are protections, yeah, and care of the pregnancy is part of that piece. So this legally protected health care in this sense talks about reproductive health in the sense of care of the pregnancy as well.
And I guess my last point, and I am voting no because I maybe missed some opportunities to put additional protections where especially when we're concerned about the correlation between abortions and human sex trafficking. I know there's separate bills, but I believe that given the dramatic expansion of abortion, we should be looking, and I think it's something we can work on together, where we can put some additional safeguards and protections for pregnant women no matter what they decide to do. So I appreciate the floor leader in answering my questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the minority whip on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if I could ask the floor leader a question.
Floor to yield.
So, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our friend from the Eastern Shore had a number of questions I think help clarify this versus the other bill we've dealt with today. I have a question for you about how this bill works. If there's a need to investigate based on standard of care or based on investigations about competence. So, for example, here in Maryland, we have there's a famous late-term abortion doctor, Dr. Carhart, who actually pioneered the use of what's known as partial birth abortion, a very revolutionary way of aborting a child. And he operates late-term clinics here in Maryland. He has for many, many years and specializes in out-of-state people coming. There were cases where he was sued for wrongful death, I think. I'm not sure, and those things are still tied up in court. I'm asking all that to say, putting aside the issue of maybe there's a state that has either completely or at least partially banned abortion, what happens if a state that has a more life-affirming abortion law than ours, what happens if a state is finding that a doctor, they're investigating them for other things besides abortion practice? So how do they distinguish between the two?
Well, first, the language it says that it has to be, directly related to the provision of this protected health care. And second is, if it's a crime in Maryland, then obviously it's not protected.
Correct.
For any of this, so.
But if it's not a crime here, it's not about crime though. I mean, we're talking about if there's a suspected that the person is guilty of some sort of malpractice or their license is in jeopardy for a variety of reasons, but they're not going to be able to get any information here, or they could only not get the information about the person performing abortions.
So so the direct answer is if that conduct violates the Maryland standard of care that we've been placed here. So it has to, if it's a crime or if it violates the standard of care here in Maryland, then there's a bar.
Is that how, and I don't necessarily expect you to know this because with the judicial proceedings, not the health committee, but is that already the way it works? If another state has different laws relating to or different standards of care and someone's operating across state lines, not that there's anything wrong with operating across state lines, does that work that way now, or is this a change?
What does that mean? So right now, the way it works for these licenses is there's reciprocal discipline. So discipline in Texas, disciplined here in Maryland.
So now it'll be in Maryland, you may be able to be safer if you're in Maryland from any potential loss of your license for some sort of malpractice.
Again, if it doesn't deviate from our standards of care and if it's not illegal here in Maryland.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. President, I'm going to oppose the bill. Our standard of care is starting to get a lot more lax in this area, unfortunately, unlike their standards of care, which in a lot of other areas in our state, which are very tight in our health codes. So I'm concerned about that, so I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Senator. All right.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Thank you. Just for the record, I want to make sure the example that I used, it's passes now, but I mixed examples with extradition and foreign judgments. Just want to make sure that that's clear for the record.
Thank you. All right, on the bill, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 859 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 910, Senator Simon Nair, Maryland Veterans Service Annual Program Definitions, Therapy Horse.
Senate Bill 910 is on third reader, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anybody wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 910 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 928, Senator Griffith, Insurance Credit for Reassurance Model Law Reciprocal Jurisdictions.
Senate Bill 928 is on third reader, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 928 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 929, Senator Griffith, Commissioner of Financial Regulation, Name and Organization of Office.
Senate Bill 929 is on third reader, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Sorry. Chair recognizes Senator from District 1. Vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded in the red for Senate Bill 611, please.
611 in the red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered.
No, I'm okay.
Since we're on it, I'd like to be recorded in the green on Senate Bill 581.
581 in the green, Senator from the 43rd.
Thank you.
Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Senator from the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 813, red to green.
813, red to green. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes the Senator from the 27th.
Yes, Mr. President, Senate Bill 611 from red to green.
611, red to green. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Senator from the 38th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 540, nay to yay.
540, nay to yay. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Senate Bill 679, yay to nay.
679, yay to nay. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. All right. Any further? Any further? All right, we got two more calendars. Two more calendars. Two more calendars. We get through it. We'll see. Luck of the Irish here. 42. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 254, Senator Hester, Business Regulations, Charitable Organizations.
Senate Bill 254 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 254 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 422, Senator Bailey, Natural Resources, Black Bass Conservation Fund Establishment.
Senate Bill 422 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 422 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 511, Senator Ellis, Health and Human Services Transportation Improvement Act of 2023.
Senate Bill 511 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 511 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 537, Senator King, Gaming Video Lottery Operation License Renewal.
Senate Bill 537 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 537 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 640, Senator Jackson, Sales and Use Tax, Electricity for Agriculture Purpose Exemption.
Senate Bill 640 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 640 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 760, Senator Carter, Security Guard Agency, Security Guard Employees, and Security Guard Standards and Certifications.
Senate Bill 760 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 760 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill. Oh, sorry, on calendar 43. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 286, Senator Simon Nair, Department of Veterans Affairs, Burial and State Veterans Cemeteries, Spouses and Dependents.
Senate Bill 286 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 286 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 356, Senator Vital Transportation Citizens Committee for Enhancement of Communities Surrounding BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport, modification.
Senate Bill 356 on third reading, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 356 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 476, Senator Zucker, Recordation Tax, Indemnity Mortgage Exemption, Threshold Amount.
Senate Bill 476 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 476 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 542, the President, Public Safety, Emergency Management, Consumer Protections Against Price Gouging.
Senate Bill 542 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 542 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 592, Senator Smith, surplus military equipment reporting extension.
Senate Bill 592 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 592 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 643, Senator McCray, Housing Community Development Program Act funding.
Senate Bill 643 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 643 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 694, Senator Jennings, Department of Natural Resources, Real Property, exchange with private real property.
Senate Bill 694 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 694 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 876, Senator M. Washington, Baltimore Regional Transit Commission establishment.
Senate Bill 876 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 34 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 876 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Senators, the desk is clear. Desk is clear. The desk is clear. Luck of the Irish. No Saturday. No Saturday. That was supposed to be a disappointment. That's where we're supposed to be, especially from the senator from Baltimore County whose birthday it is tomorrow. He wanted to be here. This is the only place he wanted to be. Let's see if we have any announcements. Any announcements? Finance. We're going to come probably noon on Monday.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 11 o'clock Monday.
11 on Monday. All right. Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Okay. Triple E will not be meeting before session on Monday.
All right. Noon on Monday.
Thank you, Mr. President. Budget and Tax will meet at 11 on Monday.
11 on Monday for B&T. All right. Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will not meet before session on Monday.
All right. No. All right. Any additional standing committees, delegations, caucuses? All right. If not, any other announcements before we do a quorum call? Let's do an enormous thank you to our pages who we've already started the day with. Felt it was like yesterday. Thank you. Hugely appreciate it. Thank you as well to our Secretary of the Senate's office for processing everything and getting everything through. Much appreciated. All right, let's do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Monday, March 20th at 12 p.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Have a phenomenal and safe weekend.